So we're only 5 minutes past starting time. That's actually pretty good by our metrics. Welcome to now the 6th edition Ministry of Science. Thank you for counting properly, Gremloe. Somebody has to. Today we are here with not one, not two, but 3 guests. We've got RealDanCody, we've got OfficialTMC, and we have LEVLHead. So in that order, go ahead and introduce yourselves to the audience and maybe give everybody a bit of a primer as to what you do both online and in real life. So DanCody, go ahead. You go first.
Sure. So my name's Dan, and I'm RealDanCody on Twitch. I started on the kind of Twitch politics sphere because I noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of British voices on the platform. I think we've gone from 3 or 4 to about 10, the lovely OfficialTMC included, of course. My media kind of background comes from starting an online magazine, No Majesty, of which I'm still the lead editor, which is an online arts and culture platform. Aside from that, I've contributed to some tech magazines in the past and was also responsible for leading one of London's key companies increasing the representation of women in the tech industry. And that's me.
Awesome. TMC, go ahead.
Hi, I'm TMC. I'm also British. I'm a qualified journalist. I started on Twitch just over a year ago now, and have been doing political commentary and kind of detailed breakdowns on the news over on my Twitch channel. And yeah, I guess that is oh gosh, that's a really short origin story, but that's just lovely to chat about misinformation and all that stuff in the media. I'm excited.
Awesome. LEVLHead, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm LEVLHead. I stream here on Twitch, twitch.tv/LEVLHead, LEVLHead. I am also a journalist reporter in rural Northwest Colorado in one of the few remaining independently owned newspapers. I report on local government, climate. I've done investigative work on fracking, industrial spills, stuff like that. I just do features, history, pretty much whatever else. I'm also an adjunct professor at a community college, and I teach sound design, audio engineering, and stuff like that. So happy to be here. It's nice to meet some of you officially. Some of you I know, some of you I don't, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Beautiful. So I think the commonality between a lot of our guests is media backgrounds in some context. So that essentially brings us into our discussion topic for this evening. Oh wow, that's quite the zoom you got going on there with the webcam.
Yeah, I had to turn off my autofocus because it's terrible. So hopefully that'll stay focused now.
Yeah, mine too. I'll probably go blurry sooner rather than later. That was very well timed in terms of the melodrama, but anyways, I digress. The topic for tonight is discussing sort of the intersection of science, media, and obviously, as previously mentioned, misinformation. That is certainly very topical these days with the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I mean, really, we could format this discussion a couple of ways. I think what I communicated to some of the ministry folks is that we'll kind of give a brief little overview as to some recent happenings when it comes to science and the media, and that will certainly crack the egg open in terms of the discussion. But I think I also told Gremloe and Natty, and I don't know if Maddie Cakes is going to meander on in tonight or not. Wasn't sure what her schedule was like, but we have some pre-prepared questions. We just kind of want to pick your guys' brains and see what your thoughts are. I think Professor Q, you certainly had some that you posted in Discord as well. So we certainly have a brain picking session to undergo here. So at least recently, and I'm just using this as a very small example, and to all of our listeners, we provided some readings to our guests in the Discord just to kind of like have them gloss over it to get an idea of what we're referencing. Very recently, this is something that's come across my newsfeed. weed and COVID have been in the news together. This is an example of what happens all the time in the science press. You hear, "Oh my gosh, insert thing here is going to cure cancer," or in this case, smoking weed is going to cure your COVID and it'll prevent you from getting it. Fuck vaccines, just smoke pot. And of course, all of these science communicators just had their blood pressure rise by like 50 points, and they all took to Twitter to say, "Hold up, hang on. We're just talking about a couple of CBD oil components. They get vaporized when you smoke weed. Like, this entire thing is just a bunch of nonsense. Like, don't worry about it." But what that exemplifies is this disconnect that seems to be pretty evident and has been for a very long time. Media reporting of science is very much clickbaity. It's very disconnected from the contents of scientific research, and a lot of times it seems to not entirely be misrepresentative. At the same time, scientists also don't do a very good job at interfacing with media, explaining things in a very lay-friendly manner so people can understand it and report it accurately. And things often get lost in this communication difficulty, leading to situations like this where people see one thing in the media and it does not represent reality at all. So my question, to kind of lead this off, and I think any of our guests can just jump in and answer this as they please. How common is this in like your day-to-day life? Like, Dan, for example, like you run a media outlet, like you independently run can you clarify, is it a newspaper or a website? Is it digital? Is it print? Um, like whatever you
So
run. Go ahead.
yeah, well, classified as online magazine, although you could argue that it's kind of varies definitions, but that's how we classify it.
Got it. So yeah, like you run an online magazine. Online digital media in general is obviously where a lot of people go to get their news these days, along with social media, other online platforms. How common is this misinformation problem in all of your working experiences? Because it seems to be a thing from the science end of it, from my background, right? I'm a grad student. I've been doing COVID content on the platform for a while now because of the misinformation issue, and it's like a never ending uh, battle for me. But what is your perspective? Is this just as common for you as it is for me?
Yeah, it's incredibly common. I would say that really it comes down to one of the roots, I think, of it. If I can kind of take the blame, I suppose, out of the journalist's hands somewhat, is the competition level. So a lot of people are racing to get their pitches in about stories that they may or may not have conducted thorough research into. And it's the typical thing: the inbox blows up, here's a story about this, here's a story about that, and you then, as an editor, have the responsibility. The book passes on to you as an editor to then say, what is this person's qualifications to talk about this subject? You've got 5 people that want to talk about, it's obviously COVID is always there. So of these 5 people, what are their qualifications to talk about this subject? And I think for a lot of platforms, that process basically becomes, well, I suppose, a lack of process. It becomes, how quickly can we get this in front of people, rather than, is this story valid? How rigorously has this been researched before it's arrived on my desk? A lot of it has become this: we need to get stories out there fast, and we'll apologize and we'll redact later. So I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying that a lot of it is demand, competition, and yeah, just this really intense digital media landscape that we've got now, that oftentimes doesn't let people feel like they can afford to be that scrupulous.
Okay, so what you're saying is sort of this desire to get stories out before other outlets do kind of leads to this I guess deprioritizing of sort of quote unquote doing your research, fact checking, getting things uh, more true to the actual scientific reporting. Is that an accurate representation of what you said?
Yes, and especially when it comes to platforms which are, I suppose, more quote unquote new media. So you see this probably less in this kind of stalwarts of rigorous journalism like the New York Times and this kind of thing. People who pride themselves on, uh, well, I say pride themselves on the detail, but then are also very aware that they are in the landscape where they can afford to take the time to research something. Um, I remember it was quite a large problem with BuzzFeed, this idea of misinformation. They're a fantastic example of a platform which was purely this digital growth based on searches and SEO and social media engagement. Quick, what story can we publish now, rather than this kind of rigorous process. I think the more independent you go, the more new media you go, you see these trends a lot more.
Interesting. Okay. TMC, LEVLHead, what do you guys think?
I don't think it's exclusive to new media. There's a particular tabloid in the UK that comes to mind that has said, well, everything from red meat to grass will cause cancer, or something along those lines. I'm not sure if you get those kind of headlines and or stories over in the US. I'm sure there's definitely tabloids. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. But yeah, it's welcome to private enterprise, guys. You're Americans, you should know about this. If you have an exclusive story and you're an outlet, especially a budding outlet, as Cody was talking about, trying to get your name out there, trying to make sure that you're the ones that, are getting the most views and attention, then corners have to be cut. And oftentimes, those corners are cut in the part of the communication where you are taking the information you have and then sorting it out into a story. Because it goes scientist, I hope I'm doing this the right way, scientist, journalist, published. And so between the journalist and the publishing, it is the journalist's responsibility to make sure that they are getting the right information and they are presenting it in a way which is authentic to reality. But again, if you're trying to get that first story out there, if you know that if you spend too long trying to get all of the facts right and every single little bit correct, you're going to lose out on readers, viewership, SEO, etc. Then of course you're going to cut corners. But yeah, no, it is a very, very real problem, and it's the genesis, I'd argue, of where these kind of headlines come from. Of, oh, look, cannabis cures COVID. Actually, though, does it? Let's have a little bit of a look more into that. Oh no, it all falls apart on second viewing. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I think what I would add to this is, I mean, there's a lot of different areas we could take it, but there's obviously the enterprise aspect of having an exclusive story. You want to be the first to break something. I think it's a little bit different in local journalism, like what I do, uh, in terms of reporting on, say, a study that comes out and the study indicates something. And you can take what that study has indicated and make a headline that people are going to click. The one that you had us read was god awful, in my opinion, in terms of the entire article. The way it's written, there's no nuance, there's no discussion of basically saying, this happened, what is this study indicating? What does that actually mean? And then providing further context. I think one of the most important things about reporting on, if you are going to report on a study that has indicated something that's where things have effectively happened in vitro or like in petri dishes or in a lab setting or any study in general. If you're going to talk about what that study indicated, I kind of think that most of the time you just shouldn't, because I think it's almost always just clickbait. But even if you are, like, maybe you just wanna show that, you know, maybe science is making an advancement here or there's indications of that. You always need to end that or put into it, like, very clearly that this isn't actually proving anything, and we need to keep that in mind and look out for what's going to come out in the future on this, and I don't think that you typically get that. I mean, in the reading you had us do, uh, we didn't get that. So a lot of times it's just going to come down to the quality of reporting. And I think generally what you see when it comes to clickbait of study shows that like eating 3 chocolate bars a week will make your dick bigger by the end of the year. Like, okay, that's just always going to be clickbait, isn't it? It's not going to be quality reporting. So, I mean, we don't generally do that when we're reporting on local stuff because we're reporting on things that are locally relevant. So we're not going to reference large studies. The other aspect that I would talk about here, though, in terms of, when corners get cut in the journalistic process, there's the deadline. We have a deadline every week. When I worked in radio, I had a daily deadline, a twice daily deadline for a newscast. And so, yeah, you are very time limited. And if you're reporting I've done a lot of reporting on COVID, and you're trying to get your newscast done and people aren't calling you back, the public health director's not calling you back, the epidemiologist isn't calling you back. You have to you still have to get your newspaper done. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you have a good editor, you have good editorial standards, you won't run things that are going to leave people with a conclusion that is going to, I don't know, have them walk away with believing something that may not necessarily be true.
Can I dovetail on this and just ask, if they've got any? Thank you. What can we do better as scientists to help ease that burden for you all?
In terms of the deadline stuff?
Well, not necessarily that, but helping better assist in the whole process of when the final thing comes out. Because I've been interviewed by journalists. And sometimes the story gets kind of scuffed up. But I've also had very positive experiences. But yeah, is there anything we can do better?
I think that if you're being interviewed about something, you should tell somebody up front. If you're talking about something where there's potential worry of miscommunication by the journalist, whether intentional or not, what you should tell them up front is, I would like to see the story before it's published. And if they're on a strict deadline, they may or may not, whatever, but you should tell them that up front so that they can plan, should I even do this story this week? Do we need to push this to next week or tomorrow or whatever, depending on what their deadline is? That way, I've had a lot of people do that. I had actually an anthropologist / the people who dig stuff up, archaeologist. I couldn't remember, but I interviewed them about, tribal stuff in our area once. And they were like, please reach out to me before you publish this. And I'm glad I did, because they're like, you need to take a bunch of this stuff out because the tribes are going to be really mad if that gets revealed. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. So telling them that up front is probably a big part of it if you don't want the story to get miscommunicated.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with LEVLHead. I've had stories where I'm representing people, or I've interviewed people who, well, I don't really want to get their stuff wrong, because if I get their stuff wrong, they're going to jump down my throat immediately, and that's going to be a lot of problem for me and the editors that I was under. So yeah, always make sure that, can I have the story? Here are my contact details, go wild, send me a proof copy and I'll say, yeah, A-okay, your conclusions are all right. And if they're not good, don't be afraid to tell them that. If they are clearly clickbaiting it into next century, please don't be afraid to go, no, you've got it completely wrong here. Actually, what this study finds is X, Y, and Z instead of ABC. So, yeah, don't be afraid to do pushback. Ultimately, this is your data. You have done the work to provide something new to the rest of humanity. Defend it. If somebody is trying to take it out of context and make it seem like it's either better than it is or worse than it is, don't be afraid to push back and say, actually, yeah, you're completely out of line here. If you publish this, or don't publish it like that. So make X, Y, and Z changes. That's what I'd say.
Well, that's actually a good segue into a question that somebody from my community had for our guest today. Was the recent article making a report on ivermectin in the university in Japan and how that was immediately skewed in the media and a correction had to be made. Do we want to go round table and see what our thoughts were on that recent gaffe?
Well, I guess maybe we should check to see if everyone's familiar with it in the first place.
Sure.
I am not, but I can look at it real quick if the others want to talk
Well,
about
I'm
it.
not actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll maybe, I guess, give a little
Yeah.
bit of background information. I could actually. Here, Gremloe, maybe you could like give them a short version. I know there was a Twitter thread that I went over that explained it in pretty good detail that I'll link in the
Yeah,
Discord.
so basically it was an article that was posted, and you can correct me, Marcus, if I make any errors in my recap of it, that a university in Japan was doing studies to see if ivermectin had any effect on COVID cells, and Reuters ran with an article saying that, yeah, it does, but needed to redact the article and make a correction that, yeah, it does kill the COVID cells, but the quantity required to kill the COVID cells with the ivermectin would also kill the host. So before that correction was made, of course, everybody's favorite ape man went on Twitter to, do a victory lap.
Yeah, I think it was a pharmaceutical company that was running the trial, so it wasn't even like a government affiliated effort. But everything else you said is pretty much accurate. I put a Twitter thread recapping it in the guest chat for for anybody not familiar with the situation. But Gremloe, I like that you brought that up because it involves not like a smaller outlet, but it was like Reuters, like a massive international entity such as Reuters, which you would think they would have the bandwidth to really do their homework on something like that. And that also kind of scaffolds with a question from my community as well. Like, was that an editor decision? Like, did a journalist do something and an editor like didn't catch it, or like what are the power dynamics in that as well?
I
Could you
mean,
repeat that
somebody.
question?
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
Would you be able to just repeat that question? Sorry, I think probably the same reason I had OBS issues earlier. Just occasionally I'm getting a bit of a in and out. So apologies if I seem rude at all, but it's probably because I'm just not hearing a lot of things. Would you just the last question, if you don't mind repeating that?
Oh yeah, no worries. I guess like what role do editors play in this entire process as well, right? Because I think we just had a conversation about like the journalist interface, right? But like when Gremloe brought up the ivermectin Reuters issue, like that almost seems like an editor just sent it without punting it back for more due diligence.
Yeah, that's what I imagine probably is the case. Like you say, with Reuters, there should be more than enough bandwidth. Is a great way of describing it to catch something like that. The Joe Rogan thing as well. I recognize that side of it now. I didn't know that it was that study, but I knew that he'd taken a story and ran with it, and then obviously, it's out in the world. I'm guessing he didn't redact his statement.
He deleted the tweet later.
He deleted the tweet, right? And that's not a correction, is it? It's just a erasure of the fact that he ever supported the idea. But it's the old misquoted lie gets around the world before truth gets its shoes on kind of thing. It's a great example of why, regardless of whether it was Reuters or it could have been somebody's blog, the right person who is interested in that misinformation, in this case Joe Rogan, that you're going to find it wherever you want it. So it's a good example of why everybody has to kind of be careful, because it can be an obscure study, and it'll be just picked up on. I suppose that's my only initial reaction to that. And yikes.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, yikes is certainly a word for it. I hope somebody got at least heavily punished for that, maybe even lose their job, because that is quite something. To not realise the amount of ivermectin that you needed in order to get that was enough to kill you. I don't know, it seems a bit counterintuitive. But yeah, no, again, Cody, fantastic point. You can't just put the cart before the horse on a situation like this. You're Reuters, right? People look at stories that you publish and go, actually, this isn't in Breitbart or whatever. I'm actually I look at this and I believe it. So when you're publishing stuff like this, especially when it's coming out of, say, the Japanese university, which readers, regular readers who aren't very scientifically literate might go, well, that's, very, very serious. I assume they've done their homework here because it's quite an obscure source. Like, yeah, no, that's absolutely unacceptable. And you have to make sure that you're getting, again, everything right before you're publishing. Because who's going to see the correction? The correction is never going to be as clickbaitable as the original title. And there is your main problem. Because as soon as that's the case, everybody, like the 100% of the people, are now going to know that, oh, ivermectin might help. Whereas a third of the people are actually going to know the truth. So
Yeah, I think that it's important to keep in mind that, media is not infallible, obviously. Even if we're talking about Reuters, they're going to make mistakes, some big mistakes, some small mistakes, some potentially, irreconcilable mistakes, or mistakes where somebody needs to be disciplined to some extent so they don't fuck up again. But this is an interesting example just because if you're making a mistake that could actually impact people's health, then it's different than just, misspelling somebody's name. Or last week in the paper, we like ran the same picture on two parts of the page with like different cut lines on it. So there'll be mistakes like that. That's why we have a corrections process, because of the mistakes. We can explicitly say, like, we made a mistake last week, we regret it, whether it's big or small. But on the topic of like editors or what role they play, and clickbait and headlines and these types of things, I think that it's also important to keep in mind that to some extent, clickbait, when we're talking about internet stuff, is kind of part of the business and not necessarily always in a negative way. And you'll just have to hear me out on this. I know there's always a negative connotation, but from a marketing standpoint, you want as many people to click as possible. So you sometimes have to write things in a way that are going to get people to read, whether it's in print or online. And I think that's okay, but if it's a clickbaity headline and the article is trash and it's not, effectively describing or hedging any of the points that are made, then it's obviously really bad. You have to find that balance though, because, as a business owner or somebody who has material interest to keep the doors open of where I work, a 137-year-old institution of the community, you want to keep the doors open, you have to keep people reading, but you also will recognize that a percentage of people are literally only going to read the headline, maybe the blurb. And so if there's not enough context in that, even then you could be, spreading around misinformation just because you're trying to, like, again, find that balance between getting people to pay attention to your story without necessarily spreading around lies.
I have a question related to
Yeah,
that.
I completely agree with that point. I think, and that's a great point about the kind of impact of a mistake. It's so different from something about mischaracterization of, a person in politics. It's not a health issue. Like you could always argue that, indirectly, yada yada, but my line on this is always the health line. Like with the whole Joe Rogan issue, it's when we talk about kind of, anything to do with kind of cancel culture or censoring or anything like that, I feel like I'm always the more kind of accepting in the conversation until you get to the point of medical misinformation. And that's just the hard red line for me. I think that that's where you have to be the kind of most scrupulous. Yeah, I just thought that point in particular is just golden for me. It's medical misinformation. That's the line where the correction becomes like fatal, I suppose, and it really can be. You look at something like ivermectin, for example. We'll never know, will we? That's the sad fact. We'll never know how much this misinformation around ivermectin has affected people and taken people's lives. But you can bet that it's probably the one that's done the most of these fake news stories we've seen recently.
There's one example I have for you, Cody, actually. Do you remember when a certain president was somehow he talked to his scientific team very clearly, and then he went to the press and he said, "Guys, I don't know about this injecting bleach thing, but I heard that it's pretty great." And is anybody fluorescent lights or whatever? Like, and then you saw countless news stories of people actually trying this this cure when obviously it is completely ridiculous. And so I know that it's not necessarily a news outlet, right? And there's obviously a difference between politicians saying stuff on the news and news people actually reporting it. But yeah, you always have to be careful what you're saying around medical information and making sure that you're presenting it in the best light that you can. Because otherwise, you get people doing completely idiotic stuff like that because they trust you. It is an abuse of the trust that they put in you as well, which is even more insidious, I think, when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Natty Science, did you have a
say-
question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not. I guess it's not direct. It's not related to health. It's about, I guess, the system as a whole. So we can do it later if you got a better question, Professor Q or somebody else.
Oh no, I was gonna ask you to jump in.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Natty.
Well, so I guess my point was not being a media person at all on the science side. One of the problems, it seems to me, is money. Like you brought it up multiple times. So I guess I have a few questions about it. But for one, like, do you think there's a better way of doing this? For example, if we had public funding, for example, of media, where you don't have to worry about, oh, I need a profit, and that is the number one thing I need to worry about in order to, stay alive. Like, is there a better way of doing this, essentially? I think that sort of leads to a lot of these problems.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's funding. Funding is the key. If between a quality product and a product that is rushed out to the market, it's all about it's the money. It's when we talk about things like, you can say, I feel like Facebook can be considered in the same kind of conversation as a media platform, right? In that you have this thing which essentially puts out stories. There are other people's stories, but it is a agent of journalism. And one of the reasons that it's so dangerous, in my opinion, is because it's completely unregulated in any kind of way whatsoever, in the sense that there is nobody there saying you've got to take that story back, and it polices itself. And the reason that it kind of has escalated to this point is because the first thing that ever got put out was completely unregulated, and it was this kind of free speech-ish oriented thing where somebody wanted to scream into the void. And it was the concept that, I suppose from my experience in the tech industry, I've learned the hard way is one of the most dangerous terms you could ever use, which is minimum viable product, which is where you take something and as soon as it's at all valid, you put it out into the world, because all you can afford to do is just put it out there and see what happens. But you can't afford to make it rigorous. You can't afford to research. All you're trying to do is make a quick buck. And you can look at that concept that is used in startup businesses and you can apply it to most independent media platforms that you can see these days. Things are kind of rushed out onto the market. All they're looking at is how quickly can we make a profit, make a return from this, and then everything else comes after the fact. So if there was that thing in place that said, okay, you want to start something that puts out stories about medical information and you want to make it unique and researched and you want to make it interesting, here's the funding to do that, so that you can take the time to research it well. You don't have to worry about profit, maybe for not the next couple of years, because this thing is valuable. It'd be really difficult to bring forward. I'm sure it'd be horrible in terms of managing it, God help anybody in charge of doing it, right? Because how many people are going to rush into the market looking to do this thing? But that's competition as well, right? I suppose you'd have to establish who is, in terms of their experience, maybe, or anything like that, deserving of that funding. But it becomes another dynamic where you're basing it on quality rather than profit and who can race into the market with the biggest funding and get the stories out there the quickest. It's not about that suddenly. Suddenly it's about what do these people actually know. Sorry, it was a very long-winded answer, but I think, yeah, basically I 100% agree. Funding goes a long way to solve the issue.
Yeah, this is a really, really in-depth discussion as well. It touches on a lot of aspects in terms of if we're talking about journalism and reporting. There, as much as possible, should always be a disconnect between, I mean, from a reporting standpoint, there should be a disconnect between funding sources and journalism. And I think one of the issues with some of these platforms that can just pop up, like especially in new media, one person or two people could start a little media thing where this any kind of sales that are happening and any kind of reporting that are happening are kind of like the same people doing it. In traditional news outlets, you would have that separated as much as possible. The sales or any kind of like finances would be separate from each other. I think that there maybe is a little bit less of that when you have these smaller groups working. I mean, I think the other thing, I don't know, I've worked for a public radio station too. So I worked in a newsroom where we did get a lot of public funding and, we were independent. But unfortunately, if we're talking about more traditional style newsrooms, that are independent, those things are kind of going away, and there's not a lot of funding for them. You really have to like scramble for that kind of funding. If you're not a nonprofit, it's hard to get it. So I don't really know what the solutions are to that, other than I'm gonna always say that you should support your local journalists. But yeah, it's definitely an issue. Another aspect is like, I mean, Noam Chomsky talks about this in Manufacturing Consent, but your advertisers can put pressure on you, whether explicit or not, um, if you're reporting in a local community. I mean, where I report, we are completely Trump country. I mean, we have plenty of reasonable people here, don't get me wrong, but every time we post a COVID story on our Facebook page, it's a fucking maelstrom of comments. And it's just like, we have absolutely harmed our businesses to some extent by just doing our job. So there's a disconnect there as well. And when you rely on a small community for your funding, because a lot of it will come from advertising, that can create a conflict as well. Um, I don't know. I there's plenty of different ways that we can share funding. We did this fundraiser with our community as well, where a bunch of people donated, and there was a match from a larger institution that provided a matching grant. So there's stuff like that that can happen as well. A lot of universities, the climate reporting that I've done on algae blooms in our river over the last 7 years was made possible by funding from University of Colorado's Water Desk is what they call it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can fund more reporting. And I think that if anything, that's what we need to be funding is actual just journalists being able to do their reporting and at the, making sure they're completely disconnected from, whatever funding source it is, and they're just doing their job.
Well, that's not
So
actually.
as a,
Really,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marcus.
well, I was just going to, I guess, ask a question in relation to the funding issue, because one solution that I've always brainstormed, and of course, I think it would require money to actually, solve, especially at least as it pertains to scientific misinformation, would be that larger outlets, at least, the Reuters of the world, would be required to have like scientists on staff or to like pay scientists consulting money to have their input on their reporting to make sure it's accurate. Is something like that viable in general? And then I probably know the answer to this question already, but there's probably like no hope of something like that happening at the local level, probably because they're so criminally underfunded, right?
Yeah, I think that, well, here's an example of something that's kind of related to this. I mean, at the newspaper, we do communication, we do graphic designs. So we have those skills available to us. And we actually did partner with our county public health department they used some of the federal funding that they got to basically pay us to do design for messaging around and like target market research and all of the stuff that would go into a social media campaign to promote vaccination, to debunk the various myths about it. And that was all content for them to use. That's kind of a little bit different of a thing than them contributing to reporting. But also in the local community, there's a different dynamic too, because I will talk to the local resources that I have available. Again, the public health director, if there's an epidemiologist available, the doctors at the hospital, if we're talking about medical stuff. And there's kind of, because it's local, like we are on a first name basis. So I think that's kind of an advantage actually. But I don't know in a broader sense, like do the scientists even have time to do that? I bet that's probably a challenge too, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending. Yeah, I think we've talked about this sort of in our, I guess, more inward facing discussions about how there's sort of this shortage of the more like public intellectual type of scientist, not like the Jordan Petersons of the world, like not that far gone, but actual academics or folks from industry who have as part of their day-to-day responsibility, sort of that role to interface with media outlets to accurately communicate information. Science communication in general within science is very underfunded, and COVID has kind of been the giant like wake up call, kick in the ass that like, hey, maybe we should do this because it's a giant problem. So we're starting to wake up to that notion of wanting to do it, but by and large, it doesn't get the money from within science for scientists to do it. So that almost makes me wonder, like external outlets such as a media outlet, if they solicit scientists with money, we make a lot less than people think we do. So we would be like, yes, please, I have student loans. What do you want me to tell you? Like, we would be chomping at the bit probably to do it.
So there's a lot of different points, I think, in what you just said, Homozygoat. And the first is that there are journalists out there who do spend some time in an industry before jumping into journalism. I have one of my professors at university spent 10 years in the tech industry before he even thought about writing articles for a tech magazine, right? And that is a very, very smart way to do it. If you gain experience in the industry and then go into writing about it, you actually have a broad base of, knowledge to know what you're talking about. There is, however, a class of journalists, and I mean, I don't know about you, LEVLHead. I don't know if you jumped straight into journalism straight from university or what have you. And I think it would also include me, sadly, who know that they want to be a journalist, kind of jump headfirst straight into it, and without really understanding different aspects of life, they want to become the messengers of those different aspects, if you know what I mean. So I think one prime example of this, not to bring this back to being British, of course, is Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson is a man that was schooled at Eton College, one of the highest fee-paying schools in this country, and then jumped straight into a job at the Times newspaper where he was a columnist. There is literally, you jump from a really privileged place there into a really, really important place where you are now a major columnist at one of the biggest newspapers in the country. But you don't have any experience in science or tech or transport or anything that you're really trying to talk about. There is a big disconnect there, I think, for some journalists between the source material of what they're talking about and what they have to write about. But the problem is, and it always will come back to this, is the funding. There's probably better jobs in academia, I hazard a guess, that pay more money than writing about what goes on in the industry, I bet. Because I don't know if you have heard anything, but print journalism is not doing too great right now. It's a struggle to get advertisers. It's a struggle to get people to your websites. There's so much competition in the space for the stuff that you are trying to do. And therefore, what incentivizes an academic or academics such as yourselves to, instead of going, actually, I want to pursue my scientific, aspirations and my passions, to, okay, no, I want to report on what's going on. where there is substantially less money to pay you to do that. So yeah, I wish we could recruit the talent that you guys want, and evidently we need, in order to talk about these issues with a degree of understanding and no miscommunication. But in reality, getting you guys to go from the scientific field to the journalistic field is very, very difficult. And of course, that's not even talking about the scientists who, would rather just keep doing what they do. So, yeah.
Yeah, this
Oh no,
brings
make me an offer.
Well, that was one of
With
my
what
questions.
money? With what money?
I guess it's a quick one. I mean, I'll just briefly talk. I mean, I think I've always wondered, like, there's like the science side, right, obviously, and then there's the media side, and I always try to figure out where the disconnect is. So on the science side, we've mentioned it before. Just briefly say, like, there's a lot of issues, like, no training for things that are related to journalism except some writing. No incentive to go into it. From the science side, at least, like other sorts of stuff. But on the media side, I'm wondering, like, how I guess, like, how many scientists are there in general? I guess that's my quick question. Like, every time I've seen usually a journalist writing about science, usually it's someone who has a journalism degree, and which is great, obviously, to have. But they don't really have that science experience. So I guess if you had to try to quantify it, like, what do you think it would be? And then of course on the media side, well, I guess you just kind of talked about maybe funding would help us get scientists into there. But I don't know if that's the only issue, I guess, like, why there aren't more scientists in there. I guess I'm just trying to figure it out. And my quick question is briefly, like, can you quantify it? What do you think, like, percentage of journalists have a science background? And I have a feeling that the tech side maybe is kind of more people on the tech side probably are, I imagine, have experience. But I guess I'm thinking, like, what Marcus and I do. Like, how many biochemists are there, or biophysics or physicists or whatever, as journalists?
It's a really hard question to
Yeah,
answer
I
now,
imagine.
as I'm sure you'll understand.
Yeah, I understand.
Because
interesting to look
first,
into.
it would be very interesting to look into. But my guess is that if there are a substantial number of these academics, these biochemists, these scientists in journalism, they're probably writing for more specific publications. So stuff that specifically deals with scientific information, which is going to be read by a far smaller group of people than, say, the New York
Sure.
Times or Reuters. So, yeah, again, don't have the stats for that. Would love to have the stats for that.
Yeah.
But it is a hard question to answer.
I think that an example locally, we have this. I don't know if he's like the scientist in our community. It's a really small community. My hometown is like 2,500 people, but he teaches at the high school. He teaches biology and a bunch of other stuff. He was a medical doctor. He has multiple degrees, and we collaborate with him a lot. So he'll basically just write stuff that we put in the paper. Sometimes it goes in letters to the editor. Sometimes he'll write things that we'll actually publish as news. That can be a good way to communicate or have them communicate. I think broadly speaking, it would be good. I mean, even what we're doing right now, this type of dialogue is, I think, very important for us to understand where each other is coming from and try to make sure that we're thinking about how we communicate with one another. Also, it would just be good for any journalist who's reporting in science or anything, really. I mean, to just, yeah, take the time and do the due diligence to develop some literacy in that beyond what you're actually reporting. Uh, and then I would apply the same thing to scientists. If you're communicating with the media, you should, do exactly what you're doing right now, which is try and develop that understanding of the way that journalists do their job, and potentially even, dip your toes into doing a little bit of writing yourself and see what that's like. Work with the journalist and maybe develop some of those skills yourself, because then, like, if we could cross over in that way, and maybe even in a more structural sense in the education of scientists or journalists, because this is obviously clearly such a big issue, and that's why we're talking about it. There should be more crossover in these things in terms of what you're actually learning in school. I mean, you could take a reporting class. That could go a long way. So there are various things. And then like the last thing is just like what qualifications journalists have before becoming journalists. I don't have a journalism degree, but I grew up around journalism my whole life, and I have a media degree. And then I just have experience, but I consider it kind of like a jack of all trades type of profession for a lot of people in terms of knowledge, because you just learn like a little bit about a lot of different things. So I think that can be good as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea. Having like in terms of the scientific education, having like a reporting class be part of the curriculum. Because I mean, I can speak only to my anecdotal experience, but I had to take a science communication class last year, and the closest we got to something like that was like one dude from the university like press release office who was a journalist himself. He showed up and like talked to us for a day, and first of all, the man was like off his rocker. The man needed like a straitjacket. That man was not okay. But besides that, like really the moral of anything he had to say is just like, oh yeah, you tell creative stories and people will click on your shit. And I was like, well, okay, that's not all there is to it. Like what about the science we're doing? Like I understand you kind of need to like bring people in, but it was very like, okay, I don't know how you work. You're just telling me to like make my research sound really pog and it'll be like the best thing ever. Like that's not a class. Like that's not valid curriculum for a PhD student. Like what are you talking about?
NA education.
So
Hogresearch.com.
honestly, like literally, it's just post all your shit on research.com, and if you build it, they will come. But that's not like representative of reality at all.
Yeah,
so I like your idea, LEVLHead.
Yeah, just write a good 1,000-word essay on VAERS, and that's it.
When you say on VAERS, is that like in actual VAERS or about VAERS? Because that could go either way, man.
Yeah, why not? Why not both?
I just want to say really quick. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Dan.
I was just going to say on that subject about, learning about reporting in science, it's made me think you do occasionally get the feature which is obviously makes a lot of people cringe, but I still think can be done really well, which is the doctor of the news show that comes on and tells people, the real science behind the thing of the day. TMC, you'll know Dr. Hillary from Good Morning Britain.
Oh,
who's a really good, but is a really good a good example of this. Somebody who really does tell it like it is, and comes on to tell a government minister, you're talking shit. Here's how it is. This is what the actual, the hard research says. And I think that character has become a bit of a kind of a joke of kind of, they don't really have any background. They're more of a kind of presenter. But I think that's an example of where you occasionally do see those worlds like blending really well. It just has to be done in the right way, I suppose. But it just made me think of that.
I was about to say it's got to be done in the right way. Otherwise, you turn into Joe Rogan and you get certain guests on your podcast to be like, "Oh yeah, fact check these ones, mate," and you're like, "Oh wow, COVID isn't as real as I thought. Oh geez, I'm learning so much today."
Yeah, degrees from Pull That Shit Up Jamie University.
No, that can't be right. What, Jamie? That's not what I heard.
Jamie,
we have Dr. Oz if that counts, though.
Dr. Oz.
Oh God, yeah, soon to be Senator Dr. Oz.
Oh God.
Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil.
At least Dr. Phil's still on TV. He's not trying to run for office yet.
I think John Fetterman is gonna wax him.
Yeah, I hope Big John just sends Dr. Oz into the shadow realm. He loses that hard.
I don't know who Dr. Oz is, or am I just really out of touch?
He's a Turkish American physician who basically got his start. Like he was a cardiologist, I think, by practice, but then he got his start in like the public sphere on like the Oprahs, the daytime talk shows, like being that caricature, like the doctor who comes on to explain like the coolest, most epic Fortnite poggers thing in medicine, or why the supplement you're taking to go to sleep is going to kill you.
Yeah,
like
turmeric root can cure your Alzheimer's, like that kind of stuff.
I've seen his face before. I didn't know his name, so yeah. Ooh. That's
Yeah, but it's interesting you guys bring up Dr. Hillary, because I've actually had conversations with someone in my community who's also a Brit. He's shown me a bunch of videos of Dr. Hillary presenting on a lot of the British media. And at least from what I've seen of him, he seems to be pretty adept. Like,
Yeah,
at least in
he's a
American
really good
media,
example of it.
yeah, like American media doesn't really have any of that. They just have like some random academic who looks tired and burnt out that managed to be like pulled away from the coffee pot for 5 minutes to like give them a very brief description of what's going on. And it always just winds up being the same, like, well, we don't know anything. We're just going to sit here and like, regurgitate things at you. But I really like that you brought up Hillary, because he's like a good template, I think, to build upon for scientists being present in media. He's awesome.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't know, you could probably just go into YouTube and type in Dr. Hillary, and you'll probably get some good clips of him.
I mean, I guess there are people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, a few people like that. But and I guess to me that's kind of like, oh, we're gonna make science seem cool so that people are interested in it. It's not like showing you the latest research, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say, isn't his kind of area more physicsy rather than biology and medicine?
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, for sure.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is very cool. It's not like mince words here. He's amazing. But yeah, we need somebody who's more qualified in the biology, virology sphere to chat about COVID in the same way that, Neil deGrasse Tyson can make you look up at the stars and go, yeah, damn, that's a pretty pog. Yeah, I want to be up there one day. Like,
Yeah, we need like a Neil deGrasse Tyson or a David Attenborough for virology.
Yeah, there you go.
exactly.
Oh my god, yeah, David Attenborough. Oh
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah,
I
I mean-
forgot that we exported him to the rest of the world.
Let's
What
prop
a
up,
treasure.
Marcus to do this. We'll prop Marcus up.
Hell yeah.
Everyone,
If you pay me more than I'm being paid, I'll do whatever you want me to. How about that?
Go, buddy. Go tell the world.
I mean,
I think
funny that you
this.
bring that up, just because on the whole scientists and media thing, I was really heartened to find your channel, Homozygoat, because I mean, I started doing Twitch, and I don't have a lot of time to do Twitch, but I'm just in my office reporting a lot of times. And so there's a lot of stuff that I can't put on Twitch in terms of the reporting process. But when I started, I wanted to do something showing me doing my job in an official capacity and sort of explaining what that's like. So I was glad to find you. And when I first found your channel, you like tracked down a study and where the funding source came from, and you did that on stream. And just seeing you explain things like that I think it's a really good thing. And in terms of whether you're taking a reporting class or even just talking on Twitch in an official capacity of your job, I think you're developing those communication skills, even if it's speaking. And oftentimes that's a more effective way to communicate with people. So I think that, I would love to see more people, scientists and journalists and otherwise. I'm not familiar with OfficialTMC, but I followed you. But with RealDanCody, I love watching them as well because of the same reason, seeing people explain from their area of expertise, not just like, I happen to be a journalist and I'm just here on Twitch reacting to videos, but actually using those skills, to communicate with people online.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I started doing this in the first place, because I don't feel like I really got it from my curriculum. So I just said, in the words of Bill O'Reilly, fuck it, I'll do it live. And here we are. So, but I kind of want to circle back to sort of that notion of like having people with qualifications being like the presenter figure, being present in media segments. And this goes back to something I was putting in the guest chat in terms of like possible reading material. And this is something I feel very strongly about. I think it's been a very like large problem in the COVID sphere, but I'm sure you could probably find examples of this being a problem for a much longer period of time. Is basically the platforming of people who have credentials but are like tarnishing the entire reputation of their field and saying things that like contradict all of the training that they have. Basically kind of like the grifter who happens to have a degree. I think in particular, the one that comes to mind is Monica Gandhi, who's an actual like infectious disease physician who works at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. So by all stretch, she's got qualifications. But one of our previous Ministry of Science guests basically said, like, yeah, I know her personally. She's very good at HIV and working on HIV, but when it comes to COVID, she's a fucking idiot and doesn't know anything. Like, someone who works for the CDC literally said that about another colleague. So, like, to me, a part of the issue, like, if we have a situation where like the media journalism side of things expresses the awesome intent to like consult experts, then it almost seems like this is the next like level, the next obstacle is who are the experts you consult. Like, there seems to be a due diligence necessary on that end too, to make sure that we're not putting some grifter who's like selling vitamins or telling people that vaccines are bad on a platform so they can do that. And Joe Rogan basically does that for breakfast every day. That's why everybody's pissed off at him. So I guess to turn this into a question for our guests, from your side, like, if you were to go through that process of, I have questions for an expert, what does the process of finding that expert look like? Like, what goes through your mind? Is there any like official process as part of like a local journalism outlet, for example, that you have to follow? Like, what does that process look like?
I guess I'll hop in on this. I mean, tracking down experts, I just try to find whoever's qualified. Sometimes figuring out who's qualified is a process in and of itself to talk about it, especially if it's a subject I'm not familiar with. Generally, I would try and interview more than one person if possible. But if there's somebody that's qualified in my area, then I'll go to them first, because if I'm reporting locally and my story is featuring a local voice, then the people reading it are more likely to trust that voice. Otherwise, I'll go to the state. I'll reach out to universities to find an expert if I can't find one in my local area. And yeah, I mean, I think we could probably tie this into a conversation about like media literacy at some point, but I don't want to go on too long. But what I would just say is that even if you are hearing from an expert, it's still up to the viewers or the readers to parse information and take from it what they will, and not just trust something because they just heard it from one person. If you hear a claim being made, even if it's by an expert, it's worthwhile to hear from other experts, and maybe that person is the only person in their field who's saying that. So I don't know. But yeah, in terms of tracking down sources, I try to find the most qualified person locally, and then I branch out from there if I can't.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to, at least from my experience, who's in the contacts book and who picks up the phone, right? Those are
Yep.
the two big things. Whoever, if you know somebody who's qualified in that field and you've talked to them before, then more than likely you're going to go to them again, for the topic that you're talking about. And if you don't know anybody, and you're calling around saying, oh, okay, well, I need somebody to, interview and somebody to put in my piece, you're not really going to be that fussy about it, especially if you have deadlines to hit. So, of course, yeah, if they pick up the phone and start saying like, oh, well, COVID's not real and the vaccine gives you 5D chips, like, obviously you're not going to publish that, right? But again, it's very much like who's at the journalist's fingertips. Now, you're asking decent, honest journalists this question. If you're now talking about the grifter types, as you call them, they are going to single out that one expert who goes against the grain, who thinks that, oh, I've got the next best thing and I'm so smart and above everybody else, because that's what they do, right? They are looking to push a narrative. And media is all about telling stories. You can't stop those people from doing that until they, actually start spouting misinformation, in which case, you're talking about deplatforming and all these other things. So, yes, from our perspective, it's very much who is around us that we can actually find and who will talk to us. And the idea, and again, LEVLHead brought this up, and I don't want to go too much into it either, of the readers or viewers of your stuff need to have a good media diet, because they cannot just read one thing and go, yeah, that's it. It's about getting the different perspectives from different outlets, because that will better form your picture of what is actually going on. Because, yeah, there will be some experts that say, oh, well, I don't think this is as effective, or I don't think the endemic is as soon as we believe it is. But if you only read the one outlet that says that, you'll start thinking that's the consensus. Where if you read 3 other different outlets with experts that say, well, actually, no, I think we could start to move towards an endemic for the coronavirus pandemic very soon, then you'll go, oh, okay, well, there is some disagreement, but the consensus is different. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would echo those points. I would say, yeah, it's about multiple sources. The same as any kind of, especially when you're talking about something academic, obviously you will all know it's about multiple sources, references, peer reviews. And I think the same thing goes with journalism. I think it becomes stronger the more points of view that you have on something. The deadline does, as with everything, crunch that. But it's it's super important. And proximity to the story as well. Kind of those two verticals, like the level of expertise of somebody and the proximity to the actual story. Sometimes I've talked to somebody who can be really well informed about the subject as an umbrella, but then may have misinterpreted the actual story that's been told that day. So that's another thing that I kind of like to think about as well. If I'm finding somebody that I want to, say, commission for a story, it's the kind of gold mine is, have they talked about this exact thing somewhere in the past? That's like my kind of ding ding winner. Where it's like, okay, this is a story that you know how to tell and that you tell well. But that's the rarity. That's the kind of diamond there. But yeah, definitely agree with those 2 points.
I want to kind of circle back to something LEVLHead said, because it was one of the questions I had in my my list here. What do you think, and this goes for kind of everybody on the panel, is the way that we can, in a word, inoculate the public from being able to sniff through the misinformation or the misleading lines within media? What's something, at least from a journalist perspective, that we might be able to, have a takeaway? Like, okay, what's like something I can snipe within media?
I'll let the other two go first on this one if they want. Or I will.
No, it's fine. I have an answer in my head. I'm just trying to formulate it in a way that doesn't just come out as word vomit. So knock yourself out.
Could you repeat the question for me again? Just
Yeah. So, what's some media literacy skills that the public can use, kind of in the way that we educated like kids in school on how to look and make sure that a website is credible, or that a website is safe to use whenever you're looking for information? What's something that the general public can use from a journalist POV?
So I think probably one of the biggest things is approaching anything that you read with a critical mindset from the get-go. Kind of just, I'm not going to read through this and be like, I know now. You read it, you got some information, maybe you got some facts. But at the end of the, like, a journalist especially know this. I could interview 3 people on a complicated subject, and I'll come away from that being like, like, I still don't know everything about it. And you definitely don't, just because you read one article where I've compiled, multiple hours worth of interviews into a couple quotes and some, paraphrased whatever, some stats. So you have to keep that in mind, that just because you've read something doesn't mean that you're necessarily informed on it, but you have more information now. So I think that's a big part of it. A lot of it will just come down to practice. Doing that in practice repeatedly, you'll get better at it. And you have to, I mean, you would kind of look at it almost from the perspective of an editor, a good editor, that is, somebody who would, like, when I submit an article to my editor, they'll cut things out where I'm using loaded language, or if I'm using, certain adjectives, if I'm, describing something in a way that isn't purely factual or objective, then they'll kind of, pay attention to stuff like that. A lot of like, if you do this enough, then you'll be able to start looking at certain sources and be like, okay, this isn't even really. There's a lot of things I just don't even consider good reporting, if at all reporting, because of the way that it'll look and read like an article. It'll have quotes. They'll use all of the terminology that a journalist would normally use. But you can, if you're paying attention, you can see that, they're framing things in a particular way. I mean, there's a lot to it. This is also a structural question. This should start at the education level early on, just reading comprehension in general. So I practice have a critical mindset, and then practice, and ask questions. If you get through an article, be like, what did this not answer, or what questions does this leave me with? And maybe then, in terms of like reading multiple sources, you don't. Sometimes if you come away from an article with a particular question or a claim, you can go just Google and look for things that are addressing that thing in particular. If you're trying to target your research a little bit more. So, but yeah, there's a lot to it, I think.
Yeah, it is a very loaded question that kind of begins from the educational standpoint, right? I think, especially in our two countries, a lot of education is literally just regurgitation. You get told that 2 plus 2 is 4, the test is coming up in a couple of months, so you must be able to recite that 2 plus 2 is 4. And because a lot of it is regurgitation, I think that might seep also into our understanding of the news. You read a story, you're like, oh, well, that must be true, or this is my version of events I choose to believe. So you go and regurgitate it to your friends, and you're like, oh, did you hear about, whatever? And they might have had a completely different side of that story because they might have read the same story, but in a completely different website. So it's hard to teach critical thinking in a school that is so hardwired to teach you to just regurgitate stuff. But it must be done. And it must be done because otherwise you will get people who stand up in school board committee hearings, or I don't know what the official names are for them, and go, I have a key. The vaccine makes you magnetic. I'm going to stick it to me right now and prove that it is, that I'm now magnetic. Like, you don't come away with arguments like that, let alone arguments that get disproven at what you're trying to do, and go, yeah, no, that makes sense. That's solid. That I'm a believer. I'm down for this. So again, yeah, LEVLHead is absolutely right. You have to approach these things critically. And a lot of these things aren't like super hard skills either. Learning to go to multiple news websites to see how each place frames the information. I mean, news stories are exactly that. They are stories. They are a version of events being told by a person who's just as fallible and has their own experience and opinions as you do. And whilst they are qualified in an official sense, I hope, to tell those stories, it doesn't mean that, their version of events is the version of events. News framing is incredibly important. What bits they decide to emphasize, what bits they decide to leave out, can totally change the whole aspect of a story. I had a fantastic example about this. I promise I won't rag on too long. But
You're fine.
You're familiar with the trolley problem, right? So you either don't do anything and you kill 5 people, or you flip the switch and you kill 1 person. You can either write a headline about that which says, man chooses to save 4 people in, great decision making, or you can go, man decides to choose to murder someone. And both of those stories, both of those statements are physically true, but obviously the framing is one trying to make the man originally look super good, and the other one is making him look like a murderer. So yeah, getting those critical thinking taught in schools is very, very important because people will grow up with more ability to do that. Teaching people to read a balanced news diet, I think, is so, so important. I mean, even I look at, Fox News, not to say that, oh, wow, this is what the gospel is today, but just to see what the conservative viewpoint and what they are saying is. Because if you ignore people like that, you're ignoring a lot of people who get their information from that. Wrongly so, in my opinion, but they're doing it anyway. So, yeah, taking it from the school side and from the learning perspective is, I think, where this has to start. And it will take a long time. It'll take years and years to grow a population of people who are more aware of their, what's around them and the media that they consume. But it will be worth it in the long term, I think, eventually, because it will mean that you now have a population that's more willing to call out the bullshit that they see. Sorry, that was really long.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
I
Just
would
to-
completely agree with that.
Just to kind
I
of,
think.
oh, I'm sorry. Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead, Cody.
No, I was just going to say I would completely agree with that point. That I think in general, I think with this subject, you can I think you could make it into an actual curriculum. I think that when I first started thinking about this kind of topic about how to spot the bullshit, my initial reaction to it was that it had to be instinctive and you couldn't teach it, but I genuinely think you can. I had the privilege of speaking to the host of a podcast called Media Storm, who are trying to take subjects that are represented in the British media almost always inaccurately. So issues to do with the transgender community, they are going out to people who are transgender and speaking to them directly, which is unheard of in the British media. They make a little joke at the start of an episode that says, we're going to talk about the transgender community without talking to Piers Morgan, a world first. And subjects like that, they actually go to the people that it affects. And that's a really good example of how you can quickly, I would say that to anybody that says, how do I spot a fake news story? I would say, are you reading the point of view from somebody who is actually involved in that issue at all, whatever it might be? So, I mean, back to the example of, Monica Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
The whole issue there, as far as I can see, is that she's an expert, but she's got no experience in the thing that she's actually talking about at the time.
Yeah.
So it would be a case of, again, it's proximity. What's your proximity to what you're talking about? Is it something that you've just said, this is as far as I can see how this goes? The whole Piers Morgan problem, again, is that he very rarely has any experience of a subject that he's talking about. So it's about moving people from their understanding of stories from this position of an authority in general and a personality. That's the name, I suppose, for it. It's moving their trust from personalities to actual experts, where it's like, just because this sensational figure who is shouting louder than anybody else is telling me something, that doesn't mean that they're any more informed about it. You need to teach people to look at somebody like Alex Jones and say, well, this is just a shouting man. There's no credibility there. But in actuality, this person has just been researching that. Or, this person has just lived that experience. So that's who I should listen to. And in terms of the reference point as well, I think LEVLHead, you mentioned in terms of sources. What really fascinates me coming from, growing this website is that I've had to learn about how Google works in depth. And I teach this to businesses as well sometimes as well, when I have to make the dirty money. But the way that their algorithm works is essentially, I always give the example of Einstein, right? It's a bit of a crude example, but the idea is that if you've got the theory of relativity, as a robot, the best way to understand that is, okay, Einstein knows his shit, because every single thing to do with the theory of relativity, somewhere along the line, will reference Einstein. And that's how a search engine works. When you put anything into Google search engine, you're getting things that have been referenced by 100 places on the internet, 1,000 places on the internet, ideally. And even though that's, a very corporate understanding of it, that's kind of how we should learn to look at things as well. is that if something is a lone wolf, a lone opinion in something, it should be inherently less trustworthy to us than something that has been cited in several different authoritative places. So I genuinely think you can teach it in black and white. And I think we should teach it in schools 100%.
Can I pick something up about that though, Cody? I think the media can make it a hell of a lot easier in terms of the people that they do get to interview to actually be honest about who they're interviewing. I know this isn't necessarily scientific, but Fox News will do this thing where they're talking about, I don't know, CRT or whatever, and they get somebody on who's like, "Oh, I'm just a parent and I'm so scared, man. Like, what are they going to do to my child?" And then if you actually look into that human being, you'll see
They're
that they're
all
on like,
ops.
yeah, they're all like in the
Astroturf, brother.
Yeah.
they'll be like in a local conservative, thinking like families group,
Yeah.
but they won't tell you that. They'll just be like, "Oh, proud parent of Michael, age 5." Like, nobody cares. But anyway, yeah, but again, that comes back to, the good media diet and reading a lot of different sources, and yeah, starting from the ground up. Absolutely right, Cody, is where we need to be.
That's a great point though, because you've put it back in the hands of the media institution, and I suppose what we have done as well is put it in the hands of the reader, where in actuality that's something that you can just, it would be an absolute, like, it would be abhorrent to every single media institution if you asked them to do it. But a quick solution would be, bam, you have to tell us if anybody's associated with a political party in any way, if you include them in a news article.
Heavy
So you
fines.
can kind of spin it that way as well.
Yeah. And like
If you
consequences
attack
for when
it
they don't.
I
I was just saying, like, yeah, fine them if they don't. Like when like Tim Allen, concerned parent in Loudoun County, is talking to Tucker Carlson from what seems to be a very well lit, well organized like streaming room, is talking about like, "Oh, this is just what Ibram X. Kendi and all of these CRT authors want." And then I literally did this on stream when that happened. We're like, okay, let's find out who this person is. Oh, look at that. He currently works for the Federalist Society and is a head of a campaign within Loudoun County. Yeah, crazy how that happens.
Wow, what a shocker.
Yeah.
Nobody would have guessed. Oh, man.
I think there's an aspect too of continuing education, or just, because a lot of, obviously we can't reverse time on people who haven't been taught critical thinking skills, but one of the things we put in the paper often is, exactly what Gremloe asked, a guide like how do you spot a fake story, and kind of list that in the paper as just an individual piece, or we'll do a podcast where we talk about that. So talking about journalism in more of like a meta conversation, I think is important for people to understand, kind of like we're doing right now. But yeah, you can continue to educate people and give them the tools. And I was even thinking about this today. It would be really good to build, and I'm sure these exist, you could find them all over the place, but it would be good to build more resources for people of like, here's a guide, here, you're going to go read this story, keep these things in mind, and then come back and, reflect on it following, here's a checklist of things to look for in this story or something.
Yeah.
I have an interesting thought experiment. I'm sorry. Who was that? Professor? No, you haven't talked much. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to be more. Anyway, I just wanted to throw a wrench in it a little bit, maybe. So you mentioned like citations matter with Einstein, etc. But there is a conversation being had within scientific circles about all the people who get kind of excluded by that, right? So just kind of throwing that out there. If you want to answer it, cool. If not, that's cool too.
Could you repeat the first part of that question? Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess my question was, do you see a problem with, citing, experts who get cited a lot, right? So it becomes this kind of reinforcement factor. And then you there's been a lot of scholars whose work has been marginalized, and as a result, because the one guy, for instance, gets cited all the time instead of someone else.
Yeah, 100%. It's something which is, in fact, it's often referred to. I think it's referred to in Google as the blind surfer model, which is, I think that's right. I might have to double check that. And it's the idea that you are essentially blindly surfing for what is this kind of objective measure of what you believe to be authoritative. And yeah, you're 100% right. It leaves voices to the side. It means that there are unheard, brilliant pieces of research that never get discovered. So it's a flaw. I have to basically just hold my hands up and say that it's something that is inherently flawed. I suppose with any objective measure, you will unless there's an actual effort to find something and unearth something which is different and yet to be recognized. That's a massive flaw in the system of looking at things that are the most cited as being the most authoritative. Definitely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put a wrench in that.
No, you're fine.
No, it's totally cool. I was just going to pose a thought experiment, perhaps, to the guests. So, what do you find that if you were to have a crystal ball into two possible futures, the idealistic utopian one where these issues are fixed, and your most utopian version of journalism is enacted? What does that look like? And on the contrast, under the current context of what journalism is, what do you think is the logical conclusion of this current one? So give me some hopium and give me some
Gremloe,
copium.
Can I get you to repeat that again?
Oh, I was saying, where would you like to ideally see journalism go, and where do you think, under its current context, it will go?
Okay.
I think that, from a utopian ideal, like, the end of the day, we're never going to not deal with, not to use a double negative, but we're always going to deal with misinformation, whether people are out there grifting or whether there are people who are just uninformed and they don't realize that they're doing it. So that's always going to be a factor that we're never really going to be able to fix fully. There's always going to be people who don't have media literacy, etc. But the best we can do, I mean, as a local journalist, I would say that we need to bolster local journalism for a variety of reasons. People need to pay more attention to what's happening locally, in terms of, being able to trust sources. I mentioned this earlier, but if there's someone in your local community that can communicate to the public through the media institution, that's a really good thing. So I think in an ideal world, we would have more reporters, because we mentioned deadlines and stuff before. More funding, more reporters, because if each individual journalist is, for example, under less pressure on their deadline, or they don't have 3 stories to work on this week, they can just work on the one, and they can really put the time in to get all the nuance and talk to all the people and double check with have the people that they interviewed read the article beforehand. Um, that's going to go a long way to have more funding, and that's, I think, where the trend is going in the opposite direction. Every journalist I talk to is particularly local journalist, is like, yeah, I used to have 3 reporters in my newsroom, now I'm the only one. So ideally, we would have more people becoming journalists, but also more people just developing their media literacy. And the negative is just continuing down the trend of misinformation and disinformation always having a significant advantage. It's way easier to make some shit up, or to make something up based off a few spurious details and draw a narrative from that. You can do that instantaneously almost, and anyone can do it, based on the internet, and the tools that are available to the public. So I I don't know where we're going, but to be fair, I think there is a lot of thriving journalism still, and you should seek it out.
I guess maybe as an example, like what would you say is thriving currently?
Well, so I guess if you look at the way that local journalists are collaborating with each other, like in Colorado, we have something called the Colorado News Collaborative, and they'll do things like all of these newsrooms will get together and partner on a particular subject that they're all reporting on, and you'll get really, really interesting reporting that can come out of that one individual newsroom might not have been able to do. So, for example, there was recently a big investigation into the mental health system in Colorado, and these basically state subsidized mental health facilities that were really, really not doing well by the patients that were coming in, and so exposing that kind of stuff. Um, Broadly speaking, I guess journalism probably isn't thriving in that sense, but there are people out there who I think do value journalism, even in our local community. I mentioned the type of demographics that we deal with, but even where we're at, we still do see a lot of support and people who appreciate, what it is that we do. So, um, you know, yeah, I guess that example of like collaboration between journalists is something that I've noticed a lot in the few years that I've been reporting.
Oh,
Pretty solid.
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
I was.
sorry, sorry. Oh gosh, what I would give to live in a world where anti-vax Karen posts something on Facebook about I'm not getting it, oh, and then somebody in the comments just goes, actually, no, here's all the information that you need, and then she goes, oh yeah, thanks, that cleared that right up, and yeah, that's it. That's the whole discourse. Yeah, the utopian world that you're asking for is again one where the deadlines don't have to be met, where the journalists don't have to or get the infinite amount of time to go, am I doing, here, scientist, is this exactly how you would present your data? It's not going to happen, guys. I'm sorry. But we live in a flawed world with flawed human beings. And part of that perfect world, I think, would also have to be politicians being 100% with their head around the facts as well. Because, again, when you're the messenger and the messages you're receiving from these people who are in positions of power that should be, mouthpieces for millions and millions of people, because that's what they've been voted in to be, say really, really stupid stuff. Again, gosh, didn't he look into the sun when there was an eclipse? Anyway, my brain's going all over the
Right
place.
as someone was saying, "Don't do it."
Yeah, but like that's exactly the point, right? In a perfect world, there is somebody who you can trust not to say something or do something, which then you have to get three experts in to talk about why it's completely wrong, and cover your ass essentially to be like, yes, we're reporting what he said, but on the other hand, it is complete nonsense. So, in the terms of where we're headed, I feel like grifting is still very, very powerful. Because, again, as I think it was LEVLHead who said, the fiction is always going to be better than the reality. Because I'm sorry, guys, some of the reality is just plain dull. Cannabis could like, if cannabis actually did cure COVID or help cure COVID, that would be the universe we want to live in, right? Los Angeles would be great, but it's not the world we live in. It's just the headline. And unfortunately, and again, I think LEVLHead, you brought this up. If no, I don't remember who it was now, but if the headline and the subtitle underneath it do not give the right amount of information and don't clearly state what you're talking about, word of mouth is going to get around because they're going to see the headline. They might not read the article. So
They often don't.
yeah, they very often don't. So yeah, in a perfect world, people would read the headline and then go, I think I'm going to read the article. But again, people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. People want to know something immediately. People want it 5 seconds on TikTok or whatever. And the more and more we go that way, I think we're doing a lot better now in terms of, tackling misinformation. And again, stuff like this really, really helps get the word out there and make sure that you guys are getting listened to. But I think just from the things we've talked about today, we have a very long way to go in terms of getting people up to a standard where misinformation thrives. And there's a whole other point in here about social media and the way that talks, the way that distributes information as well, as unregulated as it is. But again, I've already spoken quite a bit. So, Cody, take it away, please. Stop me.
Oh, no, I mean, you touched on the idea of social media. So if I can kind of take that ball and run with it, I will always bring it back to Facebook. You talked about Karen posting on Facebook. For me, that's the big kind of elephant in the room, is the dissemination of that information. It's the pusher, right? It's the kind of, we've got this information that is harmful on its own. The kind of marketplace laws will kind of dictate that it will die a death. However, Facebook's algorithm is uniquely designed to hone in on somebody's wildest paranoias and maximize that to the utmost level and get that to as many people as possible. Perfect world, we put that back in the box, and it is perfect world, right? But if you said perfect, so genuinely I would say direct a shitload of government funding at big tech, at the places where people get these stories, which is Facebook, which is Google. Although, don't accuse me of blowing smoke up Google's ass, but it is a lesser evil than Facebook, which is literally designed to act on your dopamine centers and get you to, re-scroll and refresh the Facebook page, and it preys on your worst fears. I will always hold the government responsible for allowing that platform to go unregulated and uninspected into our lives and change our world. In a perfect world, I would get them to spend a shitload of money putting that back in the box, whilst also teaching people that this thing that you've just experienced in your lives, that's social media, and it's created all of these anxiety issues for you and your children. This is why it worked like that, and this is how you can start undoing that damage. I want news to be slower. I want news to be more rigorous. I want us to learn that we don't need everything at the second. I think we think it's quite natural now to know about what what a politician's done immediately off in Westminster. And I don't think it's cracking down on freedom of information of me to say that we don't need to know that in our phone, in a push notification, in the middle of, like, I don't know, making love to our partners, right? It's not important. We can just live our lives, right? You can read about it later, and it can be better researched then, and we can have the whole story then, and you can have time to figure out whether it's important in your life. Maybe, and this is super pipe dream, maybe you get it in physical form. Wouldn't that be nice as well? And you read it over a coffee, right? So perfect world. Right. So, I mean, this is, before I start sounding Amish, that's it. That's put it all back in the box, unlearn the bad habits, and yeah.
And Maddie really missed out tonight by not coming by when we're talking about Google and Facebook. Maddie, one of our other kind of rotating co-hosts, worked in Google.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
I wish she was here.
Yeah.
That would have been an
I miss
awesome
her.
rabbit hole to jump
Can
down.
I add one more teeny tiny point of extra little context? Facebook papers and Frances Haugen last year. We all see that news, the one where it was basically like, yeah, Facebook could have done a lot more to tackle COVID-19 misinformation, but just kind of didn't. And one of the suggestions, for example, I'm pretty sure was anti-vax like posts and anti-vax rhetoric. They turn off the comments because, you know, if you're first of all, it stops people like us going, oh, I'm going to do God's work, and then start typing in the comments about what's actually the truth, right? But it also stops the, you know, the circle jerk, so to speak, of people going, yes, and there's a chip, and there's 5G radiation poisoning, and it's Bill Gates, blah, 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 you know. But they didn't. And the reason why they didn't is so obvious. If you've got more people commenting, exactly, yeah, Natty knows, you're spending more time on Facebook. And if you're spending more time on Facebook, that's more ads. So yeah, it's the way we tackle social media and the financial incentives behind social media as well. Gosh, it makes me sound like, oh, I want to nationalize Facebook. It's going to be crazy.
I mean,
but like,
very least,
look,
right
I
how
now.
would
don't
you
think
even
that's
do that?
an unfair
But-
comment at all.
No, but
I don't think so either.
it's so like borderline crazy from where we are right now to be like to suggest something like that, because again, what country does it go to? What happens? Blah blah blah, whatever. Yeah, it's such a difficult topic because we are against huge financial interests, huge companies who have a wealth of resources that, you know, love you guys, but 7 people sitting in their homes on twitch.tv don't have. So all we have is our voices, so we got to use them.
True. And to kind of go off of what you were saying, I believe the same report, if we're thinking of the same one, actually looked at the amount of disinformation that was caught by their efforts to curb back COVID misinformation. And we can take a real hard left perspective on this. Was not caught in the same way in countries in the global south, in Spanish-speaking countries, non-English-speaking countries particularly. That misinformation was not caught at all because it's not in English. So who cares? So the kind of the cultural imperialism that comes with massive institutions like Google and Facebook and Alphabet, just like any of our other institutions, has a disproportionate effect on countries within the global south. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even to expand on that, like I remember reading a whole bunch of really tragic stories out of South America where they got a bunch of misinformations from pre-existing grifters who were pushing, I think, industrial bleach. I think it was chlorine dioxide in particular. Oh, and maybe ammonia-based solutions too. Maybe they're being ingenious in their grifting by transitioning their chemicals here. But all of that was supposed to be like the cure-all. You know, grandma's got Alzheimer's, bleach. Grandpa tripped and broke his hip. It's okay, just rub some ammonia on it, it'll be fine. And that, of course, reared its ugly head during COVID, and nobody cared to stop it because it was the global south. And there are just tons and tons of stories of, you know, my abuela believed this and now she's intubated in the ICU because the bleach didn't work and it actually made the COVID worse because she was drinking it or nebulizing it or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's actually like something that has very clearly manifested, at least during COVID.
So not only are we shipping our brain rot, but we are also actively not sending any kind of medical aid to these countries. So we're just giving them the worst aspects because at least we have the vaccine, you know, the brain rotted, you know, lumpenproles are not going to go take it, but they don't have that option in the worst places where these effects are.
And also, didn't that I think that whistleblower, didn't they say that the content that they go for that gets the most clicks is content that makes you angry? I think is what it was.
Yep, they have a dial of hate and they turn it up so that they can increase profit.
Whatever will keep you on the platform the longest, because that's ultimately they're trying to keep eyeballs, you know, on their platform. And even to the extent of what's happened in English speaking Facebook world or social media in terms of misinformation or catching it or fact checking or whatever the fuck it is, that Facebook and these other platforms say they do. I don't trust it that much because
Yeah.
of a personal experience of I mentioned earlier we were helping with marketing efforts to promote, vaccination in our community, and our public health department's page has been effectively shadow banned twice with no recourse to Facebook. This goes to the discussion of regulating these companies. There is no accountability. There's no way to get a hold of these people. I spent weeks filling out every single form in the back end of Facebook that I could. I had them send an official letter, the county signed by the lawyer saying, at least get in touch with us. We still haven't heard anything. We can't post on the public health department's Facebook page anymore. And there's absolutely no recourse for it. So when they talk about, we're doing active efforts to curb misinformation, like, no, the chiropractor dude in our community who's a full-on anti-vaxxer who got appointed to our board of health by our insane county commissioners, he's on Facebook constantly ranting and raving about everything from all vaccines are bad to borderline, JQ shit. And he doesn't get shadow banned, but the public health department's page gets shadow banned. Like, so I just don't buy it. I think that they're 100% going down the profit train to get as much money as possible, and that is, again, keeping people angry and keeping people on the platform arguing with each other in the comment sections, etc.
Fucking
Yeah,
chiropractors, dude.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Fucking
for real.
chiropractors, bro.
On that note,
You
as
have-
well, with hate,
I'm
it's
sorry.
the kind of one of the most valuable uses of hate for the people that advertise on Facebook is to influence elections. So, funnily enough, I've just remembered that I was talking about this literally before I came over, because Zuckerberg has lost, I think, a couple of $100 billion off the value of metaverse, basically all because Tim Cook of Apple, because obviously the only people that can save us are the people that have the money, because that's the world that we live in. And he's stopped them tracking ads across Facebook ads on their devices, and then instantly they've lost like $200 billion. But it got me onto the idea that really in our country, we would have a completely different country if not for Facebook and the way that it's been used by governments. So I think my theory is, and I don't think this is too tinfoil hat, but you can tell me if it is, I think that you're right. They're not trying to do anything. And my theory is that I give you the reason being, I don't think that they can influence elections if they apply these rules to these companies that you're asking them to do. I think they will see, okay, we won't be able to advertise to somebody in a rural part of England that they are, that there's an animal cruelty aspect to the Labour Party, because that will be shown as false, and then we won't be able to win the election based on that. And that's an example that was literally how they won the election about 7 years ago, the Conservative Party. There used to be a case study on Facebook's website about it and how they'd brilliantly exploited this, and now there isn't because they've been forced to kind of work with political ads better. But I think that's why. I think they have that financial incentive. Like you say, it's completely profit driven, and it's power. I think that's what stops them from doing it. I think they don't want to apply the rules because one day they'll have to enforce them on themselves.
There's a really
What's
good
that?
scholar.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a really good British scholar, Marcus Gilroy, who has written quite extensively about this. If you need a source.
Hell yeah.
Marcus Gilroy.
Thank
Well,
you for
do we have any other
can
questions? Go ahead.
One more point on that, because again, I'm always the one with the case studies now. Apparently, Cambridge Analytica. Anybody
Yes,
know stuff
yeah.
about that? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah, if we were talking about profit driven, we're talking about selling information to advertisers that you entrusted to Facebook, and they used. At least I'm pretty sure they used. I want to get my language right, so I don't, lawsuits or whatever. That. Yeah, they got in a lot of trouble because apparently they were, that data is, there's only so many things they can do with that data. And they sold it to advertisers who essentially went, we're going to hyper target these groups. For you guys, it's relevant for the 2016 election. For us, it was the Brexit referendum. And we're just going to show them so many ads. They are not going to make it past 2 posts before they see immigrants are coming over. Well, for you guys, it's the Mexican border, or for us, it's the English Channel. And there is only one way to stop it, and when you get exposed to that stuff enough, and when these companies are, potentially abusing their power like this, you create a system where people begin to vote against their own interests. You create a system that is more likely to believe nonsense. And when it comes to science, that's a huge deal, because there is a right thing and a wrong thing in science. It's not entirely binary, but it's fairly close. And you create a world where people are just ready to lash out at essentially anything, no matter how opinion or fact-based it is, solely because they have that Facebook has essentially, without even knowing it, instilled a belief in them of, you should be angry about this. And now we have to deal with those consequences, and that is terrifying.
Damn,
So I guess
facts.
Straight up. I mean, I guess maybe to ask a question based off of this, is social media a mistake? What do you guys think?
No, there's so many Twitter accounts though.
I will always hold a special fury in my heart for governments that let it go out into the world unchecked and unregulated. I think technology, internet-based technology, one of the greatest inventions that we've ever birthed, and the biggest flaw of it will be that we trusted it blindly without ever giving it any kind of oversight. The hypocrisy of the government to put Mark Zuckerberg before Congress and say, how dare you do this to us and give us these fake news, will never escape me, because it was allowed to happen. We've allowed these products that prey on our brains to kind of just, you can create one today. I can create one tomorrow and I can put it up there and have it in your pocket. And that's the biggest mistake and the best thing that we ever did as well. And that's a horrible kind of duality to deal with, but that's it. It's the best thing and it's the worst thing.
I don't think I'm as cynical as you. I think social media in its current form is a mistake. I know we're sitting here on twitch.tv talking about that. The irony is not lost on me. But the way that, it exists as it currently does, with people essentially getting thrown into it at a very, very young age. I started using Facebook when I was like 12, 13. And the tentacles kind of grew from there as I downloaded Twitter and Instagram and blah, 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 blah. But people need to be more ready for that, especially when on the other side of this, you are looking at predatory or like very, very predatory companies who are like, as we just talked about, looking to make money off you in any way they possibly can with the little oversight that they have. So maybe that's something else that we need to talk about with education, how to use social media in proper ways.
Social media literacy.
Yes. And I think, Cody, I think you might have touched on that earlier. But, so I don't want to, take all the credit here. But it is very, very important in a world where you are essentially put up against these predatory forces as a necessity. Like, nobody lives without social media. And if you do, you're a freak. I'm sorry. I know that sounds harsh, but come on. We live in a very, very, like, you've got to be in on everything world. And the FOMO is very real. So when you're looking at the whole picture, a lot needs to be done in terms of regulating social media and making sure that they can't, say, show adverts to children. You know, that should be like basic step number one. And I know YouTube has kind of taken steps towards that with YouTube for Kids and whatever.
Well,
But
television found this out years ago. Sorry to interrupt.
But exactly,
Television
yeah.
got there decades ago.
And yet social media is still trying to wrestle with these questions that in some cases we literally have answers to. So is it going to be a hard task? Yes. Is it going to be a monumental task to do with all these companies, with all this money already? Yes. But it is absolutely necessary, because as we move into the world of the metaverse, they are now taking it from, you know, your laptop that you open and then they get to show you ads, to your physical workspace and eventually your virtual reality. And that is terrifying, because companies having control of your literal reality, unregulated. I don't want to be like the scaremonger here to like strike fear into the heart of your viewers. But
I
like,
thought you weren't as
think
cynical as
about
me.
that idea. Oh, actually, you know
Took the doom pill real quick.
I kind of,
We're always doom pilled.
I kind of doom spiraled there. Apologies, guys. So it turns out I am as cynical as you. It just takes me a while to get there. So yeah, I'll throw my hands up for that.
It's even more dystopian than now. I mean, we already have a bunch of unregulated companies controlling us in many ways.
It's just the commodification of social interaction. Now every aspect of your life has been commodified.
So I guess break us out of the doom spiral, what regulations will we want to see that can effectively counteract this?
Transparency at every turn. So the more severe the subject, the more transparent and signposted it needs to be. And again, this is, I feel like I'm going to come across as like a tech bro, and I just I know I can't stop anybody from coming away with that takeaway by just saying that I don't want to be a tech bro, but I don't want to be a tech bro. But you know how people say that Richard Branson and Elon Musk's ventures aren't the same? I would say that Google and Facebook aren't the same. They are two very different scales of evils. They are evils, but Google handles information in a much more responsible way than Facebook does. I think that's one of the common misunderstandings of big tech. And here's why. In Google, they have a concept called your money or your life. So Google has mandatory regulators who are told to go and look for information which is involved with either your money or your life. And it says to them, this content must adhere to a much, much, much stricter set of guidelines than every other piece of content that you come across. So as a Google moderator, you're told if you come across something that's about Disneyland, it's, that can be, you can skim over that much faster than you can to anything to do with insurance, anything to do with vaccines, anything to do with gambling, anything. So it's basically literally your money or your life. If it relates to either, it has to be a much higher standard. It has to have signposted information. It has to have more links to other information that's better sourced. You can't just have something that is just an opinion piece about cancer, because Google's guideline is shove that right down. We want something that is referenced. We want something that's signposts. And that's how we should treat social media regulations. The more it affects somebody's life and the more impactful it can be on somebody's life, it should be better signposted. And that will mean more moderators, and that will mean a much slower process of publishing, and it will mean less profit for Facebook. But the sheer reality is there is no other way. It needs to just be more rigorous if it's impacting people's lives. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. Greater transparency at every turn.
Can I ask a follow-up? Doesn't Google owns YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because so I'm a sociologist and research QAnon and misinformation, and so like YouTube had a heavy hand in QAnon, and in many ways still does. So, I don't know. I don't know if YouTube is regulated in the same way in Google, and I don't know if you know that or not.
The algorithm is nowhere near as sophisticated for YouTube search engine as it is for Google's. The main issue there is, one, there is a lack of consideration, just like there is with Google's algorithm. But the other one is a technical limitation. So in terms of citations, because it's much more difficult to put so much metadata into a YouTube video, Google's limited understanding of video content means that at the moment I could still upload a video that says, don't get chemotherapy, folks, and it will be out there for a day before it gets taken down. And that's due to the nature of how it's limited understanding of video content. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Do you think that those two play
and it's the same
a
with,
role?
say, like Twitch, for example. Sorry?
I was just gonna say, like, do you feel like those two like play a role? Like with Facebook is kind of like where QAnon not manifested, but I guess evolved into kind of what we know it as. But Facebook also has a direct line to the IDW or the alt-right pipeline. Because, you're looking at a couple Ben Shapiro videos on Facebook that your uncle sent you. You go check it out. Next thing you know, you're getting Jordan Peterson and you're getting Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern. And the algorithm in YouTube does seem to feed that. So it seems like those two are somewhat kind of cohabitating.
Yeah, there's the same echo chamber algorithm happening, and that's a problem for sure. I think the biggest difference between YouTube and Facebook, and the difference as well between YouTube and Google search, as you know it, is just simply the medium. It's the same problem. The most extreme version of the problem is this. It's Twitch. So whenever it comes up, I always use the example of, I can be talking, I always say to the chat, I can be talking to you about this, and I can veer into a conversation that encourages you to harm yourself, and you will hear me, and the VOD will be there, and it will take hours, possibly days, for it ever to be taken down, because the sheer amount of muscle that it would take to regulate me in real time is really maybe even unattainable by the big tech companies. Certainly not Twitch, which I think only made a profit this year. But when you take it on YouTube, it's more or less the same problem. With Facebook posts, it's more or less usually text or sharing of a text article. So it's much more that they don't have an excuse. So the reason that I'm always angry with Facebook is because those guys do not have a fucking excuse. It's text. You can moderate that. You just need to put in the muscle. You already know how to do it. Look for mentions of COVID. If it mentions COVID, put it in front of a human. Is it accurate? Put it in front of one of you guys, somebody that knows what they're talking about. It's much more difficult to do that with kind of video content. But again, I don't think that's an impossible future.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit out of my wheelhouse when we start talking about algorithms and such, but there's a lot of content uploaded to YouTube, Facebook, whatever, like an hour, let alone a day. More than obviously, a huge team of people could feasibly get through, but it has to be done. There has to be more employment of people to look over these comments or these videos that you're highlighting and going, is this good? Is this good for the platform? And if not, why not? And, if these videos are getting banned, give people a reason as well for why it's been banned. And I know that is currently kind of how it does, but I know that, especially on YouTube, right? It's not just some, anti-vaccine videos or whatever, the typical candidates you would assume would get banned off of the site. It's also videos about, say, stuff like LGBTQ plus topics that can get just banned out there because they're discussing controversial things when they shouldn't be. So it needs a lot of refining, and it needs a lot of care and far more due diligence than they are giving it. Funnily enough, weirdly, the more and more we talk about this, the more and more some sort of public ownership seems more reasonable, because removing the financial incentive is so big, because this is all what we keep talking about seems to always come down to money. But again, that would be a huge undertaking, and you can bet your ass that every single news outlet is going to start going, they're turning into China. Oh my goodness, look at them go. It's WhatsApp is going to be WeChat before you know it. Oh no, like, it's going to be,
Don't give me
so
hope.
much resistance to it. Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
To a certain
Doomer is
extent.
the
To a
tyrant
certain
again.
extent.
China's
All
a good
right.
example of how you can actually do something, though.
Yeah.
Like, nefarious reasons here, there, or everywhere, you can put holes in it. But China's a good case study of the fact that governments, when they want something, they can take hold of it and they can interfere. Don't let the governments act like, we can't let the governments act like they can't get involved in this beast. If
No,
they
absolutely.
want something out of it, they can do something.
But there is a line there. Like, I would personally like all Winnie the Pooh pictures to be kept on these platforms, okay? I don't know. There could be good memes
Thank
out
God
of them.
somebody mentioned it.
Premier Xi, I do not endorse this if you're listening.
I will be a good CCP member.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ops
dude,
everywhere.
that's
I'm
great
a true
advertising. We
upholder
can
of
go
Marxist-Leninist
China.
values.
But like, you know what I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
the point is, it's such a big topic. Like, this could be a whole other, I mean, maybe not Ministry of Science episode, but it could be a whole extra 2 hours talking about how we regulate, what it would look like, what the specifics are, etc. But the broader point is that, yes, we've seen it being done, but we need to be careful about what lessons we could take away from stuff that happens in China, because again, oh god, how did I turn into the free speech warrior in this conversation? Holy, I'm doing a whole
there's
bunch
acceptable
of
lines of margin, like where we
Yeah,
would want free
yeah.
speech to go and where we need to, for the greater good, curtail free speech.
First Amendment,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah.
whatever bollocks you have over there. Yeah, that's the one.
One of those.
One of the amendments somewhere.
All right, I think that's a pretty decent point in the conversation. Levelhead has indicated that he needs to step out. You guys can stay on if you like, but I want to at least give Levelhead a chance at, say, a closing thought, and you can go ahead and shout out either your channel or something you're working on that you want other people to know about.
Yeah, thanks. I just really appreciate the conversation. It's been really good. It's always good to talk to other journalists and to talk to other people who are, thinking about these things critically and trying to discuss how we can improve our society, even if that leads to what was it, doom spiraling. Um, that's inevitably going to happen. But yeah, I mean, just on what you were talking about in terms of regulation, I do think that what exactly that's going to look like is the specifics are beyond me, but there does need to be a significant effort to regulate these platforms and hold them accountable. I brought up that specific example with our public health department. What exactly it means to hold them accountable could probably mean a lot of different things. So, but yeah, in terms of my channel and everything, again, it's just twitch.tv/LEVLHead, LevelHead. I'm a local small town journalist, and I also do audio engineering and stuff like that on my channel. So, give me a follow if you like. And once again, I really appreciate the opportunity. If I'm going to mess up your window capture, I could probably just turn my camera off and leave it on, and you can disconnect me later.
I mean, don't do that with my window capture in mind. I'm a boomer. I need to figure it out eventually. So it's good practice for me. You can leave if you really need to.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Levelhead. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Very good.
Bye.
Oh yeah, that did in fact
Yeah,
mess up the
that
captures.
also.
Holy shit!
I don't like change.
Wait, how's it looking? Oh, Jesus.
I'll figure it out.
We'll just use my
Yo.
capture for this one. Don't worry.
Please, please.
use this opportunity then to ask our friends across the pond my question about how the U.S. is perceived at this current moment. I did some traveling abroad, spent a month in the UK. Vauxhall's my favorite part of London. Yeah, all right. I know who I'm going out with next time I'm over there. But yeah, how I was amazed at how all of the British folk that I was meeting were so interested in how I thought of America, and so I kind of wanted to see where things are at. Especially since it's perceived that we're exporting basically our culture, which at the moment is Joe Rogan and misinformation and all that stuff.
I had a conversation about this with you, didn't I, Gremloe, yesterday?
A little bit.
A little bit, just the kind of differences. I think from my perspective, looking at America is really interesting because it really does seem to be that you have so many different areas of your country which are completely unique and independent from one another. Now, the cynical way of looking at that would say it's incredibly divided, but I think from my perspective, it's a really good, it's a really interesting to see that things do work so independently and you have so much power in each individual state. For example, that's the one that always gets me, is that I talk a lot about like independence, like did a stream about Scottish independence and plan on doing one about Welsh independence. Those countries couldn't hope to get as much at the moment, couldn't hope to get as much power as, say, Texas has from the federal government. Like there's this real just sense of it's freedom, isn't it? It's kind of, I look at America and I think it's a game of freedom constantly. You're playing with freedoms. How much can we say? How much can we do? It's not so much a sense of, I suppose, this might sound insulting, but there's less, in a lot of areas, there's less of a sense of progress and understanding, and more of a sense of I can and I can't do what I want to do, or I can't play around, I can't express. And I think that's quite interesting because it does make, I don't know, TMC, you're British. Would you say that we're an awkward breed?
What, as a country?
Yeah, as
God,
a country. I think I think for us, I don't think we are as interested in, you can't control what I say. Like we get there and we have our Piers Morgan kind of vein. But I think for me personally, I've never been as interested in what I can and can't say on the internet as I am as to what kind of funding, mental health services are going to get this year. It's so outside of my kind of field of priorities. But in America, it seems to be all about freedom. Sorry, a really long-winded answer.
No, it's good.
Oh man. The reason why a lot of people are asking you, Professor Q, what your opinion is on where America currently is because I think a lot of people are very, very worried. Well, especially with a lot of people who have, especially academics who have their nose to the ground with this sort of thing, right? Which is, I assume, the kind of people that are asking you these questions and talking to you.
Oh no, I meant when I was out, having fun around the UK,
okay.
and just like at the bars, at the clubs and the pubs, and that dynamic just fascinated me because just a political conversation in a venue like that. But
oh well, yeah. Then apparently a lot more people are down with how kind of America's doing a bit of this more than I thought. But I think it's really interesting to see how different the UK and the US have become over the last 30 years specifically. Because it feels like ever since, and okay, bit of a history lesson, I wasn't around for World War II, but ever since then, we've been kind of like, oh yeah, buddies, we're doing the same thing, we're doing bits and everything's going well. And then, you know, you guys have Fox News now, and we tried to do, and this goes back to Cody's point, right? We tried to do our own Fox News with GB News, which is a channel over here now, and it just hasn't taken off the same way. I don't think people are, which is really surprising because when you have newspapers in this country like the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, and the Times that always consistently bat for the Conservatives pretty relentlessly, and with very little shame, you'd think that they'd get a lot more, crazy. But I think there are like certain bits in our country's history. First of all, the place that where we came from, right? I mean, yes, we also did the slavery, but the slaves weren't ours. We just sold them, which is not a justification at all. But we don't have that. The history is very different, even if it is similar in points. And to see how like conversations around slavery, especially in the US, are still very relevant, and the oppression of BAME people and minorities is still very, very relevant. The idea that you couldn't sit in the same place on a bus until like the 1970s or the 1960s is mind-blowing still to me. And to see people consistently try and go, racism's over, racism's over, racism's over, is so mind-bending. I mean, we have our own problems over here. But oh god, okay, this has kind of gone. Well, what I've been saying has kind of gone in all different directions because there are so many different points. But the long and short of it is, I think it's really interesting to see what's succeeded in terms of media and narratives and public outrage in the US, and what has succeeded is the same deal in the UK, and comparing them. Because the obvious comparison is Boris and Trump, but there's more than that. And yeah, I think we're worried in a sense, but that doesn't mean we don't have our own problems at all.
I think in
just so you know, we are worried too. So like,
yeah, very much
Thanks,
so.
we appreciate it.
I think in regards to the point about UK trying GB media is the reason it doesn't hit the same way as like Fox or the kind of burgeoning ones we're seeing now, like Right Side Broadcasting or OAN or Newsmax. I got my own like fun stories about those if you ever want to hear them. But I think one of the reasons that it doesn't hit is because fundamentally conservatism in America is about not being pro-government, but being pro conservative values in the sense that like, there is an established order and there is in-groups and out-groups. You as a conservative are part of the in-group, and that includes like elites because you are not a exploited worker, you're a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. While it seems like some of the cultural artifacts that exist within the UK is that the institutions of power still lie somewhat within the monarchy, and you can't be anti-establishment if you are pro, the royal family. That is establishment. So it doesn't seem like you can buck orthodoxy in the same way.
Yeah, 100%. We are not, we are not revolutionary. No matter how much we do think we are, we'll tear down a statue of a slave trader, but we will also like simp for the queen. And exactly as you say, you can't be anti-authoritarian if you just worship the royals, and as so many people do, have like royal memorabilia and are super interested in what the royal family do and buy magazines to keep up with their life.
Because you can be like, oh, I might vote Tory, but I don't like Boris Johnson. But ultimately, when it comes to, you know, the tippy top, you're right there.
It would be interesting to see the differences in unionization as well for me, because I think of America a lot of the times as like you conservatives. If you were to actually sit down and, you know, try to talk to them about a lot of issues, they would agree with you on a lot of them. Maybe not the racism stuff, but a lot of the economic stuff, they would agree with you. It's just that we don't have like a class consciousness in the US. Nobody's thinking about their class. And so, like, you know, it's been just, that's how the political parties have divided us, is along these cultural issues, especially, you know, the conservatives. But also it's interesting too, at the same time, you said the UK seemed kind of opposite for you, but I thought it was actually, we're kind of similar. Still, because like we had Reagan, you had Margaret Thatcher. You're a very neoliberal country. You've gotten more neoliberal, I think, over time. You have the NHS, of course, that's nice. So that's a little bit of a buck in the trend, but you've been trending, I think, more neoliberal, just like us.
Yeah, but you know what though, with the healthcare, and I think I said this to you yesterday, Gremloe, like the healthcare is the biggest to me.
Yeah.
In terms of like the practicalities of everything. I think the healthcare is the one which means that we have countries which are very different in terms of a revolutionary mindset. I think that latent anxiety of knowing that if you break your leg, you could end up selling your house. I think that is the difference between you taking to the streets and saying, fuck you, government, and being a reformist, which the majority of Britons are, who are more than content to give it a few years and see what happens. You know, who are you voting for? Tactical voting, rather than in America, where it's quite a common conversation, is, well, look at Trump, look at January 6th, right? Never here, never. The chances of anything like that, certainly now, are complete outside possibility. We do work within the framework, and I think healthcare is one of the major reasons, one of the major differences that would completely change us. And it's under threat, like you say.
Yeah,
we might get there, and
I think that's
that will do it.
Kind of an annoying thing about, for at least my perspective on America, is like those revolutionary moments we do have are always like for the conservative side. Like we fought a civil war. Who started it? The South, because they wanted to keep their slaves. And then January 6th, you know, was a little kind of like a coup a little bit, but it's always the conservatives kind of doing the revolutionary kind of stuff. I guess not always. I guess there was civil rights. Okay, maybe I'm a little wrong in that, but the big moments that I think of, at least.
No, you make a good point though. That's actually so insane, especially since the Conservatives have literally gotten everything they wanted in like the last 40 years, you know, since Reagan. Like it's so completely insane.
Not everything, but as far as like economic stuff, yeah. I mean, our culture always progresses like more left, but as far as like legislation and economics go, we're very, very conservative.
But to add on to a point of Cody's, right? Our conservatives and your conservatives, and I know you mentioned this, Gremloe, totally different idea. If the conservatives, I mean, our conservatives definitely want to dismantle the NHS, right? But if they came out and said that, they'd never get voted in again. Because the NHS is literally, behind Brexit, the last election was the most important issue.
When you guys hosted the Olympics, you had nurses like dancing. Like we did nurses dancing on TikTok.
Yeah,
like it's so like tied into your cultural and national identity. And what's ours? Jalapeno poppers. Like that's it.
Yo, go to Applebee's, bro. Yeah. It's literally just a list of brands, like
all owned by the same company too.
Healthcare is the kicker. It's the difference between keeping calm, and it's the difference between fucking taking up arms in the streets. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And look, if you want to meet some of the most passionate people about politics in our country, talk to someone who's trans. Because as I said to you, Gremloe, the other day, there's an exception to the healthcare in our country, and it's trans folk who don't enjoy the same privilege of the free healthcare. And that, for that reason, it's a very, very passionate fight here on Turf Island, because healthcare changes everything. As soon as you're excluded from that system, you are, you're on a revolutionary front. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
They're not even allowed to access the healthcare system there. Is that?
Oh no, yeah. But in terms of actualizing like a transition, that becomes suddenly you are relying on private healthcare, and it becomes
It's basically like
story.
annexing healthcare from trans individuals through red tape. You make it so impossible to achieve it that it is not on the books illegal, but it is in achieving it like basically illegal.
Abortion.
to kind of like, because I don't want to let this point escape, because I think it is very important. I feel like the NHS is a fantastic example of British people having a lot more, and I know this is going to sound crazy because this is a public institution, so hold on to your hats, fellas. It gives us a lot more freedom to do things. If you want to move jobs in America, and correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I sound British as all fuck, but you have to think about your health insurance, right? If your health insurance is paid for by your employer, you need to make sure that if you're moving job, you have another one to go to, because you can't afford to not have health insurance for any given period of time, especially if you've got already existing conditions, pre-existing conditions. Like, and when you're being, when your minimum wage is the equivalent of like £5 an hour over here, which is like mental. How much is it again? The minimum wage?
$7.25. But if you're a server, if you wait tables, you make $2.30 an hour.
Woo! Yeah, like when you're when you've got stuff like that happening, when you're being squeezed like that from both ends, when you have so little choice in moving job, and if we do earn money, it could be literal pittance, right? You begin to understand why people turn to anti-establishment rhetoric, even if it's false, and start believing stuff that is just mind-numbingly wrong, because ultimately it is the institutions of power that allow people to keep existing in that state, right? And the Republicans and the Democrats are both responsible for that. It's the reason why you keep getting the right rising up and attacking it is because, despite the fact that they are the most squeezed, they are the people who've been fed the most conservative rhetoric. Because guess what? If there's a side that benefits the rich and the powerful, it's the conservative rhetoric. So, yeah, I feel like the reason why we're a lot less angry in this country is because we have some public institutions which allow us greater freedoms to do more things and to change our lives, which you guys don't have. And it's another reason why everybody in the flipping media and the Republicans will fight tooth and bloody nail to stop you from getting Medicare for all, or I don't know,
Education,
like any kind of police
infrastructure,
reform,
yeah.
education. Yeah. Because as soon as you start giving people stuff, like pittance, it doesn't even have to be like major, right? It could be a public option for healthcare. As soon as you start giving people stuff, people begin to go, but why can't we have more of this?
Yeah.
And as soon as they start asking that question, if you're a conservative, you're in trouble. Because, but what about the public finances? Starts to seem a little shit in comparison to, or you could have this.
Well, what you're saying is actually a brilliant insight, because that sentiment is never expressed within American politics, media, like the public square. It's never said like, are you free? Because the first and the only time I've ever heard a person say this, and I'm gonna simp for Bernie here, and I always keep him close to my heart. I have him on my ring right here. In his 2020 run, he did a speech that it never clicked with me until I like heard him say this out loud, because again, no one says this. Are you free when you forego medical health care because of the expenses or the fear of going into debt? Are you free when you don't have access to quality education? Are you free when you have unstable housing? Like, are we really free in a country that doesn't value these things the way we value, like, owning a Ford F-150?
Guns.
Like, what is this American freedom if we don't have the things that literally we need to live for? So, like, your point is brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks for blowing
Yeah,
smoke
and
up my ass, I
Yeah, yeah,
guess.
And that's why it's so annoying we don't have class consciousness. Because
Yeah.
it's if people would realize this, like, yeah, it's true. It's so true though. You don't get a single opportunity to do anything that's freedom. You don't have an opportunity to, I don't know, I want to change careers, so I'm going to go do this job,
Yeah.
schooling to do this or try something else out. You don't have the freedom because you literally have to be working 24/7 or you'll be on the street and homeless.
Yeah. You guys in the UK, like, at any point you could say, yeah, you know what, this job, not feeling it. And you leaving it and finding another one, the only thing that might prevent you from doing that is location, funds to move, gap in pay. But for us, and I experienced this last year whenever I quit my job, I had to wait 3 extra months so that I could make sure that I had insurance for whenever I left it. I had to keep going through this, like, I was like having mental breakdowns like every other day because of my job. So I had to endure that strife just so that I could hopefully, in case I got sick or hit by a car, not die or, be shackled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt for the rest of my life. Like, these are real, tangible things that we try and tell ourselves that it's our fault because the system makes it our fault.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is the great beauty of the Labour Party gift, which is the NHS, and that's why they keep trying to dismantle it, because they want to work us till we die as well. Like, make no mistake. And the thing that stops them is exactly as you say. It's that healthcare.
Yeah.
It's the healthcare, and it's the fact that I could, I can quit my job and I can break my leg. There's also a system that I can rely on for a bit until I get another job. It's a maddening system, and it's deliberately, quite undignified, so that I can't rely on it for long, but I survive, and I get a bit of freedom.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I mean, we have some semblance of that in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These came about after the New Deal with FDR, but there are still people who actively try and either completely get rid of it or gut it to the point where it's, you might be able to buy groceries that month, maybe. But because, and like you said earlier, we're very fragmented, not just culturally, but geographically. We're still a very, very segregated country. Like, the community that I live in is about 1,500 people in our little town, and there are pockets based solely on racial demographics. Just in that, it's like one street, and it's just like, this is the black area, this is the rich white area, this is the podunk area. Like, we're still hyper segregated.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask a little bit of a question to kind of maybe throw off the UK is better than the US dynamic just a little bit.
Sorry,
I still
that wasn't
agree.
the intention at all.
I knew you hated America.
All superior and all that.
Hey, look,
It
if it's
didn't
any
work out
consolation,
for us
Sebastian
300 years ago.
Goddamn bullshit, brother.
I mean, look, if it's any consolation, like, I kind of hate America too. If I'm being real, I live here, so I can say that.
Yeah.
I can give you so many reasons where we're worse if it makes you feel better. Anytime you want them.
Oh no, I'm not going that hard. Something that I've seen pop up during the pandemic, and DanCody, you said this perfectly when you brought up the Labour Party's gift to the UK and the NHS. There's obviously an effort, largely Tory driven, to privatize it, to strip it of what it needs to function, and then rhetorically tell the populace, hey, look, it's not working. You should privatize it instead. That'll make it work better. They do that shit here. But an interesting bellwether that I've caught on to in not just the UK or the US, but a bunch of other Western countries is sort of the rising anti-science animus. And with COVID, the vaccines, everything like that, that's certainly, I think, been the biggest amplifying force. I guess I'm going to phrase this as a question, probably to you and TMC. How much of that sentiment have you seen rising recently? Is this like, and if so, have you seen this like before COVID? Has this been a COVID only thing? Because usually when there's that anti-science animus, something else comes on the heels of that. It's not just like we hate vaccines. It's we hate all vaccines. We hate healthcare. Like the rhetoric of trying to privatize, talk shit about, destabilize the NHS goes hand in hand with anti-science animus. That's kind of why I view it almost as like a early indicator of where populist sentiment is sort of going. Like in the U.S. as an example, I've been telling colleagues of mine, if Republicans get back power in any sort in 2022, 2024, they're going to take revenge against the institution of science for COVID vaccine mandates, for COVID precautions, for things like that. They'll have the power to, and they've riled up their base to have sort of this manufactured consent that their base wants the elected officials to do exactly that. Put Fauci in jail, shoot Pfizer into the sun because everything pharma does is bad. Like that's kind of how they feel. So I guess the question is like, how much of that mentality do you see in the UK now? And has it gotten acutely worse during COVID, or is it kind of just like simmering at a baseline and got exacerbated when there were like protests against mandates and stuff like that?
I might let you take the lead on this one, TMC.
So, let's begin with a little bit of a mind blower, shall we?
Do
we
it.
all know who Jeremy Corbyn is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jezza.
Jeremy Corbyn, yeah. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, Seven Nation, whatever. He has a brother, and his brother doesn't get talked about a lot, but his brother, I don't know if it's older or younger, is one of the most prolific anti-vaxxers in our country. His name is Piers Corbyn, and the apple falls so far from the tree. It's ridiculous. But he and a bunch of like other, I forget their names because they're so irrelevant. I say that, but like only to me. But there is an anti-vax movement that they kind of spearhead. And there have been protests in Trafalgar Square of these people coming up. And there was one doctor, and I will never forget this line for, well, maybe not as long as I live, but pretty near, damn it. One of them said, the NHS doctors should be tried like the doctors were in the Nuremberg trials. Just let that sink in for a second there. The people who have, and like, the people who have helped, and these are also the people who believe that like COVID might not even be real anyway, and all of the other kind of traditional conspiracies and blah, blah, blah that you've already heard of. And they come out with stuff like that, and there will be thousands of people there. Now, obviously, those tentacles extend far further than just what we see on the ground, right? But it's impossible to quantify that amount of stuff. But interestingly, our media, although they do report it, it's like way at the bottom. Like if you go to like BBC News, and if there's like a massive anti-lockdown protest in Trafalgar Square, it will not be the front page of BBC News' website. It very rarely will be. It might get covered, but it won't be like, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you're giving like the kind of sideways eyes, Cody, because you think I'm saying anything wrong. But
no, I'm trying to look up a source for something before I don't want to talk out of my ass when I make a statement.
Okay. Fair enough. That's fine.
It's vital. Sorry, I'm not giving
but
you.
like,
I would never give you any side eye.
but it's very rare for like a big media outlet, except really like GB News, to go, oh, here's this big anti-mask, anti-lockdown protest that everybody's been at, and blah 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 blah. Look at them go. Like it doesn't really happen. So yes, these people exist. Yes, I probably know some of these people as well, because it's mostly parents of friends and that sort of thing. But is it as big as encompassing an entire political party when you only have 2 political parties to vote for? No, it's not quite that big of a problem yet in this country. Thank fucking Christ.
I have a splinter question for this once, RealDanCody, if you want to say your piece on this.
Yeah, I was trying to quickly find out what the difference in vaccination rates is in our country, because
I think you guys are at like 70-something%, and we're at like, what is it? Mark is like low 60s, 64?
Yeah, in terms of 2-dose vaccination rate, yeah. If you want to talk
I
about
think single
boosters, it's a lot
doses.
lower.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that's kind of what I was trying to find, because yeah, from the last time I looked, I thought it was quite stark, the difference. Maybe it's not that stark. I ended up coming across a rally, turned a corner, and it was there, and it was quite like ferocious. Like, they were passionate. The rhetoric seems to be the same, like comparisons to the Nazis and tyranny. We both like the word tyranny. In general, though, I think it's always difficult. It seems to be more fringe, the kind of anti-vax, anti-science rhetoric. I think, like with Ed, I think all countries in the world, the whole world, I think the whole world got more anti-science because of the pandemic. So I think the main thing that allows people to become anti-science, as far as I can see from just purely observation, the 2 biggest factors always seem to be poverty and isolation. And I think the pandemic was a big twofold. I think more people, retreated into their homes than ever before, stopped talking to people. And, there's a big effect on people's incomes. People lost their jobs. And I think that's probably why in every country around the world, you saw this big boost in things. And,
social media as well.
I wasn't. Yeah. Oh, massively. Yeah, exactly. I think that breeds it. That really breeds it. So, in this country, I've never seen it as much as I have now. Still don't think it's a massive thing. And, thank God I don't know anybody that's like particularly anti-science. But I think it's no coincidence that it's happened at a time when we don't speak to each other as much, like reiterate to each other. I said to my dad, like, it was like super casual as an observation, but I do stand by it, is that I think a massive example of things that people don't do, like, or didn't do at the start of the pandemic, certainly, is hear something batshit on the radio, then go into work and try and say it to their peers. Like, it doesn't seem to happen. It didn't happen for at least a year. And that, I think, is where a lot of things get needed out, like ideas, people just saying to each other, like, well, that's bullshit. Like, I heard this other thing, or like, wait, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, people can't let things go. And I think the fact that people just sat there and heard things for a year, didn't necessarily talk to people as much. Even when you got driven onto social media platforms, exactly like you say, it's a completely different form of communication, right? It's not like this a lot of the time. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's just comments. It's passive. It's not conversation. It's just, I've heard this, here it is. And that lack of communication was a killer. I think it really allowed these views to breed.
Yeah, I'm curious about the differences now between the UK and the US, because I definitely remember before COVID, I have friends from all over the world, and they like to do the, oh, Americans are dumb kind of thing. It's kind of a stereotype, I feel like. And so they were talking about anti-vax stuff. And I was like, well, actually, US is not that bad for anti-vax stuff. So I went and I saw a study, and France was by far the worst country. The US was maybe in the middle of the list, maybe towards the bottom more so for anti-vax views. But now, I mean, I don't know what the percentage would be. There's different survey questions, obviously, but now there's an entire party that pushed it, in my opinion, that really, really, really bred this. And now, I don't know, 40% of the country maybe would be like, screw vaccines? I have no idea.
Like, isn't it just mental, right? If you sit down and think about this, it's so crazy that, like, the darling of the Republican Party, Trump, is currently losing support within his own party for coming out in being pro-vaccine and pro-science, despite the fact that he's still telling a bunch of lies about how he was the one who made it, and a lot of people were behind the fact that he made it, even though they didn't want to take it.
They said it would have been 5
boggles
years.
the mind.
I got it done in 9 months. Nobody said it could be done. Yeah. Well,
Why has he come out and said it? Does anybody know why he's...
Oh, well, I actually, so the only reason that you can draw to this is a socio-political analysis. So you would have to look at like his legacy and legacies of presidents before them and all political actors within America, but it's literally just ego. It's literally it. There's no, like, politically, like, within, like, his standing within the base, there's no reason for him to do that. There's absolutely no reason he would do that. But his ego and his legacy, because that's all presidents have when they're gone, is like George W. Bush. What did he have? He was the 9/11 president. What did Obama have? Black president, healthcare, Obamacare. Ronald Reagan, freedom and like capitalism. So all he has to look back on from his presidency that could be drawn as a positive is that vaccine, Operation Warp Speed. So his own base and his people within the party that are like fervently anti-vaccine, because that's the beast Trump created, they're now going against his legacy. So he's trying to maintain like this this thing that he was able to do during his time. And if that gets undermined by his own party, what successes can he draw on other than build the wall, Muslim ban, and like owning the libs on Twitter? What can he draw to? And tax cuts, but those had a sunset provision and that they didn't see. So that is literally just ego. That's the only reason he's doing that. It's just legacy and ego. But
wow,
what I was going to draw on earlier is if you're seeing that like radicalization within conspiracy theories and like anti-science stuff, what we're seeing coupled with that, because it is rooted within our culture, is right-wing extremism. Like just this week, we had a Nazi rally in Orlando. We're seeing it right across our border with the Freedom Truckers in Canada. A lot of those have like connections with right-wing groups in America, and like the leader of it is an out and about just like Nazi. Do you see that same kind of like undertones of fascism within the anti-vaxxer movement?
Yes, is the answer to that question. For the first time in about 100 years, I don't remember the name of the group, but at an anti-vax protest in September of last year, there was the British Union of Fascists flag flown.
Okay.
And it was
Jesus.
the first time. Oh yeah, they exist.
They're unionized. My God.
You didn't need to know that they existed, but they do. And I know, right? But that that flag hadn't been seen in public for what, at least the articles I was reading, say like for decades at least.
Right.
And so it's the fringe of the fringe, I think. And again, when you like, because, oh gosh, it doesn't even make any sense, because like you want the NHS doctors to be prosecuted like the Nuremberg trials, but at the same time you're like pro-Nazi. What the fuck is going on? Anyway,
it's so bizarre.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Because we have like, I mean, this sounds like a very niche like microcosm of that movement. There are obviously like other like groups and like underlying sentiment that exists within that movement, but in America, it's like we have like a ton of these groups. Like the Klan is active in my area, and within these splinter groups of the Republican base, there are still actors that have like cross-pollination with legitimized groups like the VFW or like Veterans of Foreign War, and then those go into like Proud Boys and the Klan, and that splinters into Public Works, and then next thing you know, we have like people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a straight up QAnoner, and Clay Higgins in Louisiana is a former sheriff, now congressman, whose claim to fame is going to Auschwitz and like making a vlog and being like, this is why we need strong police. Like insane
No
people.
way.
Yeah.
What?
Oh yeah.
I've never heard of that.
He's hilarious if you ever want to look him up. Hilarious in the way that like when you stare into the abyss, you can only laugh.
What's his name?
Clay Higgins.
Clay Higgins.
Yeah, and Gremloe, thank you for asking that, because that's kind of what I was hinting at with like the anti-science animus, because usually that is coupled with all of the other disgusting shit.
Mm-hmm. Eugenics, like if we go like real deep in it, we'll find like phrenologists and stuff. We talked to Evo last week about like evolutionary psychology and like bioessentialism, like this kind of stuff that like permeates, that's still within like these circles.
Yeah, it's really international as well. Like I ended up doing some streams about the far right in different countries, and what I found was that like all these motherfuckers know each other. It's kind of, it's one of the rare like instances of politics where we are really connected as countries, America and Britain. Like, I don't know if you remember Tommy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was like, Trump was like BFFs with him and was getting him over, and Farage, like there was a big connection there. Like it's really just a really, really international thing.
Yeah, Steve Bannon, I think, was very international too. Like he was very much integrated into like Cambridge Analytica, trying to prop up like fascist movements in like Eastern European countries and shit. Like the right is frighteningly organized despite the absolute nonsense that comes out of their mouths. Like you realize they are way more organized than even the left or any other political entity.
Well, that's the thing though, isn't it? Because the right is cohesive within its ideology. It's a contradictory mishmash of different, like, broader points of view, but fundamentally, the hierarchical nature of conservatism is consistent through all of these regions and ideologies. Whether you're a neocon or you're like a right libertarian, if you're a sovereign citizen, I don't know if you guys have that in the UK, but they're very funny. All of these still stem from that same obsession with hierarchies and like naturalizing that type of order.
Yeah, so right. It's anti-progress.
Yeah. So like even if someone were to break away and be like, okay, well, hey, I'm not into this, like, let's, you know, round up X minority and then like get them out. There's people who are like, okay, well, how about we just like make it impossible to immigrate, like make it like really, really hard. Those are still ideologically consistent. Their end goal is still the same: less immigrants, less poor people. So within the left, there's a wide diversity of thought, and a lot of their end goals are not the same.
Yeah.
Also, we have no power, so.
So I think that that actually might be a decent opportunity to maybe, I guess, give some final thoughts and maybe a little bit of hopium, if there's such a thing, to round out all of the doom spiraling we've been doing tonight.
And talk about science, because we went off on a bit of a political tangent there.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's kind of what Ministry of Science is about in a sense too. Like when I was asked by someone in my community, like, what are you guys even doing on this segment? Like, what's the point? You know, part of what we like to do is to have people who are very knowledgeable in their areas. You know, for you guys, it's media journalism, to really sort of democratize that knowledge, to share your perspectives, your thoughts with everybody, because we are very much anti-gatekeeping of knowledge. That's something we run into in academia constantly. But we like to emphasize the political angles of things because it's something that really doesn't get talked about, especially within science. You know, Gremloe and I have had discussions. You know, Natty could probably tell you all sorts of reasons why he's not very out and about politically, because it has negative job prospect implications. So, you know, these are conversations that should be had, and not in like the Joe Rogan way, like, oh, we're just having a conversation while destabilizing the country through misinformation. Like, we actually want to try and, you know, share perspectives and maybe push people if they're not like necessarily as radicalized to the left as we would like them to be. So we're pretty overtly political, and that's why I think we allow the political tangents to go on, because it's certainly helpful to kind of clock in where people are at, even if they're purpose on here is to talk about their subject matter expertise, right? Everything's political at the end of the day. So politics certainly seeps into all of our day jobs and everything we do. So it has to be talked about. So I think on that notion, I'll go ahead and let our guests give some final thoughts and shout out either their channels, something they want to plug, any projects, anything you're passionate about going on. DanCody, go ahead and start, and then we'll go to TMC after.
Oh, well, I guess the first thing is just thank you to you guys for getting this together, and just kind of making it happen. Read and Rap is first person that kind of approached me and said, hey, these guys are doing this thing, I think you might be interested in that. So shout out there. And yeah, it's just been a really, really interesting. I've really enjoyed this. I knew I would, because it's kind of feels like a conversation that I'm always naturally kind of having in my head. And it's the reason that, like, the reason that I started streaming was to kind of have these conversations, basically. And this journalism, if journalism is part of the subject and the umbrella of the subject, then this is a platform that I think is a huge potential in terms of journalism. I think that it can do a lot of different things really, really well. And I think, yeah, it's got a huge amount of potential. Like, everybody here who makes content, it's the kind of content that, like, I like to see. It's this kind of reporting of information. It's very, yeah, it's just, I'm very, very positive about this kind of space. That's kind of how I feel. In terms of a plug, just if anybody wants to follow me on RealDanCody, I'm always kind of just looking to have conversations with more people. So come and find me.
Awesome. TMC, go ahead.
Yeah, same shout outs. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. It's been one hell of a chat tonight. I honestly, it's 4 a.m. currently over in the UK. And so I was very, very tired at the beginning of this, but I've definitely woken up, and you guys have been super, super interesting to talk to. And it's kind of got my brain going a little bit, and that's been absolutely fab. So you guys have, yeah, just thank you so much for this opportunity. In terms of hope, well, what was it? It's not copium, it's hopium. That's the
Hopium,
one.
yeah.
I think there is a lot of hope. Again, more and more, if people are the power, right? The more people you rally behind a cause, the more power you actually have. And it feels like a lot of institutions are immovable and steadfast and stalwart, but it's not true. Society is very shifty. Things change. I mean, think about February 2020 and March 2020, and you can see just how much can get done in a short period of time, and how easy it is for norms to just change. Even if in the current moment it seems like everything is so the way it is that it will never change. And again, that's why I do my show, it's why Cody does his. There is possibility for better things out there. What those better things are, we might even disagree on. But it's why we do our shows, it's why we stream in the first place. And from the scientific community, I really do appreciate this show, because meriting up, or like putting together journalists and scientists, is only going to make the dissemination of credible information more possible and easier. So thank you very much for this, guys. In terms of plugs, at OfficialTMC _ on both Twitch and Twitter, I will be streaming. It's still Thursday for you guys, right? Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be streaming tomorrow, or on Friday. The time zones are a bit funky. At 5 p.m. British Standard Time, that's when I do my show, The McGowan Conversation, or TMC. Going to be going over a lot of UK news there, which might be a little bit, out of the wheelhouse. But if anybody's interested on seeing what's going on our side of the pond, what we're talking about, what's kind of going on in the news circles over here, feel free to check it out.
McGowan, are you Scottish?
Oh, I knew I was going to get that. Yes, it's
You're so warm.
my granddad.
You're so warm. All the Scots I met were very cold.
Oh, I'm born and bred English. It's my grandfather was Scottish, and then I got born in the South, so I have this accent now. Like that's basically it.
I have a lot of UKers in my chat. So I was immediately like, I clocked you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, everybody. I think that'll probably do it for episode number 6. I remember how to count to 6 this time. I hope you're proud of me, Gremloe.
I am.
This is
Endlessly.
episode number 6. In the books, this is a banger of an episode, and I really hope Maddie is sad that she missed this because she would have enjoyed this.
Oh yeah.
As far as next week is concerned, I know we're having Constababble on to talk about climate change. We still, I think, need to confirm with her. We haven't actually spoken in a little bit, so we'll see what Const is up to, and then we'll go from there. So thanks again for tuning in. TMC, RealDanCody, thank you both for being here. We very much appreciate your time and your insights, and we certainly hope to be in touch in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good night.
Yep, stay safe. Take care.